There we go. And now we are, I see we're live on YouTube. So I'll call Prescott Special Town Council meeting for July 6th to order and move right on to item 2, approval of the agenda. The recommendation tonight is that the agenda for the Special Council meeting of July 6, 2020 be approved as presented. Do I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Ostrander, seconder. Councillor Burton, any discussion on the agenda this evening? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion is approved. Item 3, declarations of interest. Any declarations from members of council this evening? Seeing none, moving on to item 4, delegations under 4.1, service line warranties of Canada. I welcome Elise Dostal, the senior manager of partner acquisition with service line warranties. Elise, please lead us into your presentation and let us know what we could possibly help our residents here in Prescott.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to allow me to share some details on the program with you this evening. Should I share my screen? Do you have it on your end, or should I share my screen with the presentation and go through it on my end?
Kimberly, you did send that out a little earlier, so everyone does have it. It's up to everyone. It's just when we lose control of the screen, sometimes I've seen the benefits of both, but maybe you want to try share the screen at first if anyone has any issues.
Sure, yeah. My previous delegations, typically we've had it up and gone through it, so I'll just I'll do that and then see, just a moment. Oh, it says the host disabled participant screen sharing. If you guys are able to pull it up on your end, I can just go through it verbally.
You should be able to share it now.
Okay. Okay, so I'll just jump right in here with the service line warranty program. So essentially the program, we partnered with AMO LAS and now the Canadian Federation of Municipalities to offer homeowners protection on the private side for the water and sewer laterals. We find in many cases, many homeowners who have issues in this area are unaware of their responsibilities. Certain, residents, when they have problems, they think certain things are the municipality's responsibility, and then are surprised to find out, when they can have pretty high unexpected costs on the private side. So through this program, we offer them a warranty so that they're able to mitigate their risk in this area. So these lines can fail for a number of reasons, as I'm sure you're all familiar, and they can be costly and stressful. This particular program is 100% optional. We offer 24/7 customer service. We work exclusively with local contractors. There's no cost to the municipality, and we pass back a percentage of the revenue from the program onto the municipality as well. So going into kind of a breakdown of the products, we offer the warranty for the sewer line, the water line, and additionally, it's not tied into municipal infrastructure, but it is very popular with the interior plumbing product. Typically, homeowners will buy all three at the same time. So this kind of goes into a breakdown of the coverage levels for each of those products. Typically, we do find the vast majority of claims do fall below those, but in some cases we have made adjustments to offer higher coverage caps in situations where, for example, homeowner responsibility goes to the main or something of that nature. Do you have a percentage of your homeowners who are on septic and well systems?
No.
Okay, I'll skip over that then. Typically, we offer this predominantly to single family homeowners. It must be the owner of the home who purchases the warranty. We don't offer any kind of or ask for any kind of pre-inspection. Simply the homeowner is asked if they're flowing when they call to enroll in the program. There isn't any waiting period, so we do occasionally have people who are aware that they already have a problem, who are self-selectors, but we take that into account as well. So one of the main questions that we get a lot is the distinction between this type of program and insurance. So while we do use many of the same terms, this is really not an insurance, but more of a service pledge between us and the homeowner to arrange for a contractor to help them in some of these situations. So we do typically suggest, to ask your home insurance provider what type of coverage you do have in this area. Chances are it's not the repairs or replacements of these actual lines are typically not covered in a standard homeowner policy. And if they are, it's usually, added on as a rider for a significantly higher cost, typically with a deductible and some out of pocket before you're able to get back up and running. We market this program through direct mail. So we work with a municipality to share the information of the program with their residents to act as kind of an educational PSA to say, hey, homeowner, did you know that when it comes to this number of issues, this is what is the town's responsibility, this is what is your responsibility. In the event that you wish to enroll in an optional warranty, here is something that has been made available to you that's been vetted by the town. So typically we look at, frozen services in the winter, leaks in the spring, things of that nature, and mail the homeowners a few times a year based on those seasonal issues. We work, as I mentioned earlier, exclusively with local contractors. So when we partner with a municipality, we set up a contractor network in that area. And contractors love the program typically as well because it rings the bell for them. It allows homeowners to be proactive in situations where potentially they maybe would have put repairs off due to cost. So it's great for the contractors as well, and there's no haggling over pricing or getting paid. And we ensure that your homeowners are being serviced by contractors who are licensed and doing things up to code. These are the rates that we charge on a monthly basis or an annual basis. As you can see, the feedback that we get is that they are very affordable for the level of coverage that's being offered. And how this came about was we responded to a RFP from City of Hamilton several years ago, I think about 8 years ago now. And when we responded to City of Hamilton's RFP with this structure, AMO LAS approached us and asked us if we would consider making this available to all municipalities in Ontario, at which point we partnered with AMO LAS and approached the other municipalities in Ontario and let them know that it is available to them as well. So we now have 60 partners, most recently City of Ottawa and your neighbors over in Castleman have joined into the program, and we've now paid out over $3 million in repairs with 8,000 jobs with local contractors. So these are some of our program participants. As you can see, it really ranges municipalities of all sizes all across Ontario. And there's a few missing from that, but we do have quite a cluster of partners over in Glengarry, Stormont, Dundas, and now Ottawa and Castleman as well. And we're in talks with some of the other neighboring municipalities. So essentially, the process to get started is very straightforward. Once council approves the program, we coordinate on a kind of kickoff call. We work with the municipality on the mailing, and we try and make it very easy to get off the ground and take up minimal staff time. So that's the gist of it. I will just go back to allow for some questions for the remainder of the time that we have. I guess pause share, stop share. Sorry about that. My second virtual delegation and the last one, they had the presentation on their end. So apologies for that. It's still an adjustment. But at this time, I'll welcome any questions that you might have.
No, that went extremely well, Ms. Dostal. That was excellent and very quick too, because we do have a lengthy agenda tonight. So
Yes.
we appreciate that. So just in a nutshell for everyone, essentially the municipality endorses this, and then it's up to the homeowner. They pay the premium or whatever you want to call it, if you want to get away from the insurance terminology, as noted, for protection on their water and sewer. So essentially, if I'm a homeowner and I have a sewer break, and the town comes in and tells me, it's actually it's within your property, it's up to you to pay it, that then you would step in and cover those repairs. Am I correct in how the program essentially works?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, somewhat of a subscription model, if you will, where as long as they're paying a monthly or annual fee, should they have any issues on the private side pertaining to their water sewer laterals or the interior plumbing, they can simply call us with a 1-800 24/7 365 number. We arrange for someone to come out and service them that is going to do things up to code and properly. Within a reasonable amount of time. We try and make it 24-hour turnaround, which in the winter a few years ago, when there was a lot of frozen pipes, was during the holidays, was much appreciated by many of our participants. And yeah, it's a win-win because it doesn't cost the municipality anything. There is a small revenue from it, and it's a great option for your homeowners to protect themselves in this area.
And of course, it is endorsed as well by AMO and LAS.
Yes, and recently now also the Federation of Canadian Municipalities.
Excellent. So essentially, I think everybody, just for people out there that may be watching the meeting, because when you say it's like insurance, but not quite insurance, but just to get to grips on how it actually functions. But I think everyone should be pretty clued into that now. It's an interesting concept and something that I think a number of people would be interested in. But I'll open it up for comments, questions from members of council. Anything this evening from Ms. Dostal? Councilor McConnell.
If we are reconstructing a street, and as we normally do, offer the people that live on that street the option of having a new pipe put in, do you cover that?
It would no, because it would be only if they were enrolled in the program and an issue came up that needed repair. So we won't necessarily just go and replace pipes that don't necessarily have issues, or have it applicable to all the homeowners on the street with a particular issue. They have to be enrolled in the program. But we do get the question also with some of the lead pipes, and other issues like that. And when we do repairs or replacements, we bring things up to code. But there does have to be, a clear issue that's happening. So if as a result of some of the work that was being done, it caused issues on the homeowner side and they were enrolled in the program, they could certainly call us and we would come and take care of that. But we couldn't necessarily do it as you had described.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor McConnell. Councilor Shankar, please.
Yeah, I just have a question, Ms. Dostal. Can you tell me what percentage of a little town like Castleman would have enrolled in your program?
They actually only just signed on a couple of weeks ago, so we haven't even mailed their homeowners about this yet. So okay. I can't necessarily say that now. I will say, it ranges. So we have some areas with very small populations that have a larger uptick. We have some areas with much bigger populations where we expect a larger response and it's smaller. So it depends on a variety of factors. It's really hard to say, really, because I think there's a number of things that contribute to that in terms of how well it's received. If then, after the first mailing, homeowners are aware of it, one person on one street has a particular, job, we come and do the claim, everything is great, then the next batch of letters come out the next season, a number of people have heard about it, then the enrollment is significantly higher. And it's, sometimes it's a high enrollment rate right out of the gate. Sometimes it takes a few mailings over the course of a year or two for that number to climb. So it really varies. It's hard to say. But in Castleman specifically, we've only just partnered with them very recently. So we'll see how that plays out. But a lot of it depends on the population, the age of the homes, the issues people have had in the past, and how well we roll out the program in conjunction with the municipality. So, we try and make it as smooth as possible. There's a number of factors that go into a successful rollout. And I think, the better that is, the better it's received. And, hopefully the more homeowners sign up, but there's certainly no minimum amount that need to be enrolled. It's just about making it available to them as a great option that's very affordable.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Shankar. Councillor Young, please.
Thank you, Brett. Many of our lateral problems result in damage on the customer's property caused by a tree and the roots on our property.
Yeah.
What happens when 3 of us get involved in it?
Oh, so you're saying, yeah, if it's stemming from a number, it's covering the span of multiple properties with a root intrusion.
Or at least we are deemed to be responsible because it's our tree.
Yeah, absolutely. And it happens all the time. It's a very common problem. Hopefully in that scenario, all 3 homeowners are enrolled in the program, obviously, because that makes it a lot easier. In the case of this, say of the 3 homeowners that are, involved, say 1 homeowner is enrolled in the program and the others aren't. I would imagine that likely it would just be, we would cover that homeowner's responsibility specifically. And the remainder of the job or the responsibility from the other homes, that piece of the pipe, whatever it may be, would be on those additional homeowners, or the other ones who weren't enrolled in the program. On our end, for the homeowner that was enrolled in the program, for the part that's on their property, we would take care of as much of that as possible. But we couldn't necessarily get into repairing infrastructure on homeowner properties that were not customers of ours. So in an ideal world, all those homeowners would be enrolled in the program. But typically, we would be required just to take care of the homeowner who was enrolled in the program and the area of their responsibility, replacing their part of the pipe.
So we have a policy where we have preferred vendors. So any problem like this, we call brand X. That might not be the company that you choose to partner with.
Well, we'll take whoever wants to apply. So for when we partner with a municipality, basically we'll go to Public Works and say, okay, do you have contractors that you work with that locally have a great reputation, they're doing things up to code, they're licensed properly? Those are the people we reach out to first. To say, hi, we're coming in with this program, we'd like to work with you. And we have, great references from contractors who have grown their businesses through this program and can vouch for that. So it is something that typically people, go for if they own a plumbing business. And any contractors that we didn't approach as part of that are certainly welcome to apply, and we'll take those people into consideration as well. We can't always guarantee who is going to get what job. It depends on a number of things, response time, availability, things like that. But we do have a whole team that manages that aspect of things, and they try and be as fair as possible. And they do expect a certain standard of, professionalism and speed of service and things like that. But certainly, any of your local contractors would be welcome to apply, and any that were recommended by the town would be considered first.
Okay, thank you. Last question. How long has this program been around?
About 8 years. We came into City of Hamilton through that initial RFP. I believe back, I think about 2012. I'll get the exact information for you. But following that successful partnership with City of Hamilton, they've renewed for an additional 3 years, or sorry, they renewed for an additional 5 years following their initial 3 years. And AMO LAS approached us then to, ask if we would take that model to the rest of Ontario. So I've been with the company for 2.5 years now. So I have been responsible for partnering with many of the smaller municipalities around Ontario as well, who may not have necessarily heard of the program initially when we first partnered with some of the larger cities like Hamilton. But certainly we've been in Ontario since then. And originally actually are from the UK. The company itself was founded by our founder in the UK, and they're listed on the London Stock Exchange, and headquarters in the States too. So we've been around for a while. We've been doing this for a long time. We've seen pretty much everything. So I'm happy to also get some references from our longer standing partners like City of Hamilton, if that would be of interest as well, along with the program manager at AMO LAS.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Further comments, questions from members of council this evening? Seeing nothing further, so I'll just go back to our CAO. Matt, I don't hear any objections to this, so could we bring this forward for August with the usual quick report, maybe just summarizing things? Ray did mention a couple of potential questions, maybe some comments back from other municipal users of the service, maybe the LAS manager, and just if there's any other any specific questions as well, I'd ask council to reach out to Mr. Armstrong between now and the end of the month, so we can get this going for our August meeting. So if everyone's okay with that, I leave it at that this evening. Matt, anything you wanted to add tonight?
Oh, more than happy to bring it back for our next meeting.
Okay, so if everyone's good with that that plan of action, we can bring it back for full discussion and consider the decision to endorse the program as of our August meeting. So that sounds good. And Elise, want to thank you again for joining us this evening and taking us through what looks to be a really good option potentially for our residents, especially something like this that does tend to leave people in the lurch sometimes at the worst possible time. So coverage for these sorts of incidents might be something that's could be very well received by our residents. So we'll look at that, and we'll be back in touch in August.
Great. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Take care and have a good night.
You too. Bye.
Alrighty, so moving along, we are on to item 5. That's minutes of the previous council meetings. We just have one item there under 5. It's 5.1, the special council meeting minutes from June 15th, 2020. A recommendation being that the special council minutes dated June 15th, 2020 be accepted as presented. Do I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Young, seconder. Councillor Ostrander. Any discussion, comments, or questions on that set of minutes this evening? Seeing none, then I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thanks, everyone.
Mayor Todd, if I may, sorry,
Yeah,
I'm going to declare a conflict of interest for 7.1.
Okay, thank you very much, Councilor Burton. So if we could just log that into the to the agenda then before we get on to item 7.
My apologies.
Yeah, no worries. It's easy.
He
to
was
miss that
waiting,
at the start of
it was just on mute.
it's easy to miss that at the start of the meeting sometimes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Councilor Burton. So item 6, communications and petitions. 6.1 action items. Nothing there tonight under action items. 6.2 though, as usual, we have the information items provided under separate cover. Recommendation being that the information items under separate cover be received and filed. Could I have a mover, please? Moved by Councilor Burton, seconded by Councilor Shankar. Any discussion on any of those items in the information package this evening? Councilor Jansman, did you have your and?
Yes, if I could.
Someone else too there, but Councilor Jansman, please start off, and then Councilor Shankar.
If I could, concerning number 10, our community legion, asking for our support in helping advocate on their behalf to the provincial and federal level. I think that maybe from what the media is suggesting that they've been a little bit of an oversight, and they too, like every other business, cannot offset their costs with revenue from bookings and membership gatherings and such. So if we could have a discussion of whether we could help to help advocate for their behalf, that would be great.
Yeah, fantastic point. That is something that's becoming an issue with a lot of legions across the province and the country. So if we could look at that and maybe bring back a resolution of support, or just get that on the agenda for August to make sure that we can lend our voice to that situation as well. If everyone's okay with that, we'll look at that for our next meeting. Thank you very much, Councillor Jansman. I think I had Councillor Shankar next.
Yes, I was also going to mention the Legion, but I also saw something in there about eight local deaths from fentanyl abuse, but there was a name on there that is helping people. So I thought maybe we could take advantage of that and maybe have that available to the public, whether we do it through social media or something, even just awareness. I mean, there's lots of things getting lots of attention in the media these days, but 8 local people dying from fentanyl abuse is just, to me, is unbelievable. So it's something that's kind of under the radar, and I think we should pay attention to it.
Yeah, that did actually come up. There was one incident, I think, listed in the police service, the police report the last couple months. Forget which one it was on now. So we just had our first PSB meeting in some time there last week or 2 weeks ago, and that was raised there. And I think it was a new type of fentanyl as well. I thought it was purple or something. We did ask the OPP about that, and obviously it's an ongoing issue. The stuff is an absolute blight on society. So yeah, if we could look at that, publicizing that even more. We do the usual news briefs with the OPP, and they put their own publications out, and we always have input into that. So maybe if we could look at the fentanyl for the next one there, Councillor Shanker, I think that would address some of it to get some things out there. If we could look at that and what's in the action report, and work with the OPP on publicizing resources and so on more. That's a great point. That good, Councillor Shankar? Is that?
Yeah, that's perfect.
So Kimberly, if you could just coordinate that, maybe we could look at that with the OPP, please.
Sure.
Thank you. Anyone else on the info package this evening? Seeing no further comments, so I will call a question. All in favor? 6.2, motion is approved. So now on to staff, and just a few staff reports this evening. So under 7.1, the first item is a Planning Advisory Committee report 03-2020. That's the proposed zoning bylaw amendment for 481 Macaulay Road. And that Planning Advisory Committee recommendation is that council deny a zoning bylaw amendment under Section 34 of the Planning Act to allow for boarding or kenneling of animals in the residential zone R1 at 481 Macaulay Road, Prescott. I would put that out there and ask for a mover, please. Moved by Councillor Jansman. Do I have a seconder? Councillor McConnell. So I'm not sure. I see the Smiths, and welcome the Smiths to the meeting tonight. No concerns there if the Smiths do want to speak to us. Just I would ask, keep the remarks quite brief. It's a little out of the ordinary, but I'm more than happy to give you the chance to speak to us this evening. Mr. Armstrong or Mr. Merriman, any preamble on this, just to give some of the background for those of us that were, of course, not involved in the discussion at Planning Advisory Committee. And that was, of course, the chair, Teresa Jansman, myself, and Councillor Burton, who did declare the conflict of interest at that meeting, and then again tonight, and it's logged off for the purposes of this discussion. So Matt and Sean, any preamble, and just kind of go over some of the background before we move into this, and then I'll give the Smiths a chance to address us with some of their points as
well. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'll try to keep it short, as it is a fairly lengthy report. But in general, back in February, we were made aware of a pet boarding service that was very minor occurring over on 481 Macaulay Road. I spoke with the Smiths, explained to them the concerns we had with the bylaw and stuff like that, and explained the options of considering a zoning amendment. When I went through all the details regarding the official plan and the zoning bylaw, most of the concerns seemed to be that we didn't want to create any sort of business that would create a nuisance odor or smell in the traffic area, which is why something like this would normally come to a zoning amendment. A zoning amendment is used basically whenever, although we can make all the rules we want for, you can't plan for everything. So certain things you ask to come before either council or a planning advisory committee in order to make sure that it fits into the character and nature of the neighborhood. Through working with the Smiths, the staff felt that we had created an acceptable plan that was capable of being enforced and maintaining the spirit of that. The Planning Advisory Committee, though, did not agree with us, and so therefore they motioned to have it denied. Or I want to say it right, Kimberly, but their advice was to deny the application. After that, the Smiths reached out to me and I explained their options, and they made the request to come to tonight's meeting.
Thanks very much, Sean. Sorry, I had the mute on. Matthew, anything further to add to that?
No, it certainly, Sean explained it well. If there is any kind of concerns or things like that, or where you like things to be taken a second look at, it can always be referred back to Planning Advisory at the will of council. But certainly brought it forward as per the discussion at Planning Advisory last week. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Armstrong. So I'll turn over to the Smiths now if you want to address some of your points, and please go ahead anytime.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. CJ wanted to say a few words first about what the business is about, and then I just wanted to talk about the objections that were raised.
Thank you. So my name is CJ. I am the owner of Happy Holidays Pet Boarding. I just wanted to clarify that the pet boarding is what the name implies. People come to me looking for someone to look after their pets while they're gone. Now, the confusion there is that people mistaken it as a kennel. I can honestly tell you it's not. We do not have a kennel in the backyard. All the animals that we board stay here in the house. And it's completely soundproof. The only times they are outside is when I take the dogs for a walk, and I came to the neighbors to clarify that the ones who wrote letters in expressing their concerns about this being a kennel. I clarified that it's not, and then they have agreed to support my appeal in hopes that it will be opened to the public.
We were able so far to meet with 2 of the people who wrote letters of objection. But what we're asking today is to see if there's any way to mitigate the concerns on the application, and perhaps this could be deferred back to the planning committee. We would like a chance to canvass the neighborhood more thoroughly. We've only just begun, and address any objections with neighbors and with the council. But it was true from what we've discovered, most objections came from a mistaken impression that we wanted to build a kennel instead of sitting with pets in the house. But that impression, I think, came from the bylaw, which mentions kennel. Our house is not a kennel, and as CJ said, we wouldn't be keeping animals in any cages outdoors. So we asked whether an exemption to the bylaw might be reasonable to take into consideration. What we're actually doing is what many people in Prescott are already doing by looking after pets for friends. So there were 5 letters of objection. 3 were objecting to the ideas of the kennels in a backyard. And as CJ met with 2 so far, they did sign a petition of support now that they said they understand it was something different than what they were led to believe from the town's letter. There are possibilities of mitigation. For example, maybe a temporary use to see if any problems did present themselves. Also reducing the maximum number to 2 dogs with us at one time. The lack of a fence was raised by Mr. Hutton. We never intended to keep animals in a backyard because they would bark at passersby. But if a fence is requested, we certainly are prepared to build one. And I think the precedence was mentioned as a concern. This is for council to decide, but the existing laws regulating animal control are existent in the Prescott laws. And perhaps those could address any concerns that people have regarding noise violations, etc. There's very good existing laws. So finally, just regarding an exemption to the bylaw being at all possible, the whole notion of rezoning our house was the request of your town. You came to us, you told us you wanted us to apply for rezoning. We paid $1,000 for that privilege. It seems hard now being told that we were not going about this the right way because we've done everything you've asked us to do. We are complying and we will continue to comply with what you request. But it is indeed something that is going on in the homes of Prescott already, just as surely as babysitting and pet sitting for friends and neighbors. So if there's any advice and help we can get going forward, we'd be very appreciative. Thank you. That's everything.
Thank you very much, Tracy and CJ. Really good to hear from you both this evening. So I'll open it up to members of council for comments. Councillor Young, please.
Thank you, Brett. Deferring this motion does seem like a reasonable request to allow them to go back to the committee with a more complete story. And certainly, though, I had one person call me about it several months ago, and their description was a whole bunch of dogs out in a kennel in the backyard, and they didn't think that was suitable for that neighborhood, and I agree. But I'm sure that once they hear what the actual plan is, they're reasonable and they might reconsider. I'd like to give the Smiths a chance to talk to people and talk to the committee again and see if there's a way to do this properly. Certainly, I think the existing bylaw referred to as the cat and dog bylaw, it allows for 2 dogs and 2 cats in your house at one time as a homeowner, does it not? Sean?
Through
Anyway.
you, Mr. Chair.
Please.
Yeah, actually, it doesn't speak directly to cats. It does speak to dogs. It just simply says that there should not be more than 2. However, exceptions have been made on a case-by-case scenario when it's not appropriate.
Yeah, and I suspect there are many homes that have more than 2 that we don't know about. However, I would be in favor of deferring a decision tonight and sending it back through the process.
Thank you very much, Councillor Young. I think I had Councillor Shankar next.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Young. You know, let's not to diminish the work of that committee, but maybe just having a second look at it. And if they decide, you know, with the proper actions taken by the Smiths that they don't approve it, then at least they've been given the opportunity to try. And it sounds like they've been doing everything by the book so far, and you know, they've come to us as opposed to doing it without our knowledge. So I'd be in favor of that as well.
Thanks very much, Councillor Shankar. Councillor Ostrander.
Thank you, Your Worship. I am in step with my 2 cohorts here. I first noticed the sign in front of the Smith residence back in March or April that they had applied for this exemption. And I was impressed that TJ was completing your veterinary assistant program and was dedicated to getting into the profession, and starting out with a home-based business like this seems like a logical first step for her. So I think it's fair that they be allowed to further canvass the neighborhood and get a true feel as to how the neighbors and the surrounding area feels. That's my pitch.
Thanks very much, Councillor Ostrander. Anyone else? Councillor McConnell.
This is one of those cases where I think it's better to ask forgiveness than to ask permission, because they've asked permission and it's cost them $1,000 and they don't seem to be any farther ahead. I took a ride back on my bike today to have a look to see what the house looked like, where it was exactly, and it's just a bungalow and a normal street. If you look across the street from it, you've got St. Mark's School, and I suspect school buses and kids and playgrounds make an awful lot more noise than a couple of dogs being walked down the street. I don't really have a problem with this. If this was a kennel, I think it would be a very short discussion tonight, because that's just a flat out no for any town or city. I can't imagine any town or city approving a kennel in a residential neighborhood. But as they've explained, and as they're apparently explaining to the neighbors now, it's not a kennel, it's a dog sitting service. Leanne, who has excused herself because she lives in the neighborhood, offers a child care service. This is a dog care service. Her kids are out in the backyard in the summer. These dogs are going to be walked. I've had 4 dogs, and all 4 of my dogs have been looked after by friends in neighborhoods when we've been away. And to the best of my knowledge, I don't recall there ever being any complaints about them. So I'm in complete agreement with what has been said so far. I encourage you to talk to the rest of your neighbors, in particular those ones who have made objections. And if you can get them on board, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't allow you to do it. But I think a point should be made. A kennel and a dog sitting service are 2 totally different things. And I don't know why under the current bylaw they would be listed as the same thing. And going forward, when that bylaw is redone, I would think some kind of dissection or difference there should be made. Thank you, Mayor Todd.
Thank you very much, Councillor McConnell. Well, only one councillor left, I think. Councillor Jansman, you have a comment.
As I mentioned in our planning committee, as much as I applaud CJ's desire and passion, and I really do, and I appreciate the cost that was put forth, we were looking at, you know, immediate neighbors expressing concerns that we could not ignore. We were all expressing true concern that what about the next request that isn't so conscientious and willing to put in their work. I don't think we have the staff capacity to monitor this. I think it truly almost outlines that we don't enforce our current bylaws. So to have the argument that so many people are already doing it, well, that does, 2 wrongs don't make a right. So, you know, a business is a business. It's a Facebook page. It's a boarding school. There is a safety of 2 local schools, and they do board more than just dogs. You know, are we willing to take on that liability of pets not being familiar in the area when we knowingly now know that we have endorsed it? So I think the committee was put in a very, very difficult position. I think we all want to support CJ on a personal level, but when it came to doing our jobs, I don't think much has changed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jansman. Councillor McConnell, I'll let you go back for one more comment, please.
Thanks, Mayor Todd. There's just something I forgot to mention. One of the suggestions request was that CJ buy 6 Town of Prescott dog tags. If this were to go forward, I think that's absolutely ridiculous. Why should she have to buy 6 Town of Prescott dog tags? She's never going to have 6 dogs there to begin with, or it's starting to get to be a kennel. Just a simple rule of the business. If we're going to keep your dog, it has to have a tag, whether it's a tag from Edwardsburg, Augusta, Brockville, or Prescott. If we're keeping it, you have a dog tag. We should not have to force her to buy dog tags. That's crazy. Thank you.
Thank you. As this was explained, and Sean, correct me if I'm wrong on this, the 6 was the number that was decided upon with between discussions with yourself and the Smiths, I believe, with CJ. Was it not that there might possibly be some time where there might be turnaround, so there may be an extra dog or 2 there when there's a transition? And the idea was that we would have our own tags on the animals there, so we'd be able to like fully control it without interfacing with other municipalities and so on. Was that not how it was explained?
Yeah, if I may, that was Sean's suggestion. That was not what we wanted, and we certainly are very happy to limit our, care for 2 pets at a time.
Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, that's correct. I suggested to them 6 simply because in the future, I didn't know if they'd want their own pets and stuff like that. There could be turnaround where dogs or one's leaving at 4 and one shows up at 3 or something like that instead of 4. And as for the tags, Councillor McConnell, as the mayor suggested, the idea was for us to quickly get the dog back to where it belongs at the current time. And she would simply slip our dog tag on to whatever animal she had at the time so that we could make sure it got back to the right place quickly, fast, and efficient. Like I said, it was a suggestion to solve a problem when you could have a dog that's a little nervous being in a new environment.
Okay, well, that's something. I mean, that's if we take this back tonight, that's obviously something that can be on the table for discussion. So, anyone else have any other final words before I have a couple comments myself, and then we'll try to resolve this evening. Anything else from any member of council? Okay, my own opinion on this, it's pretty much the same as last week, but I'm more than willing to let this go back and have some further discussion. I don't think it hurts to, we're not in any huge rush to decide this, so we could bring it back. But the issue I had at the Planning Advisory Committee meeting, it's the same one that I have now. It's the planning aspect of this. And then you toss in some of the direct neighbor complaints. I think that just emphasizes the worries. But I've always been informed that, and this is all going back to council back in 2006, that site-specific zoning, especially for new uses, is not great planning because you are basically backdooring a business use into your community that wasn't previously available. So if we were to entertain this and go back at this again, I would like to see it looked at as not site specific. If we're going to open up the bylaw, let's open it up and look at this for the whole community, because as Councillor Jansman quite rightly pointed out, and what was one of the major subjects of our discussion when this was a planning advisory, this isn't just about one business, whether it's site specific or not. It does set a standard. It does open up the possibility for this use in other areas of town. I can't make a comment on what that operator would be, if it would be somebody that would be as conscientious as CJ and the Smiths are here, or also, I mean, there could be other issues with regards to the location and so forth. So to me, if we're going to entertain this, it should be as part of the overall town-wide zoning. So in an ideal world, that would mean this would get tied into the official plan and the zoning bylaw, the greater zoning bylaw changes and amendments that are coming. Well, I should say it's a full rewrite that'll be coming next year. But I mean, we could always, hurry this up and look at this as a town-wide issue. But I really don't like site-specific zoning for new uses. I don't think it's good planning, and I think it can take you in directions that you didn't initially intend, because you are crafting site-specific zoning for a very specific user and a very specific purpose. And generally, that's not advised moving forward. All due respect to Sean, and I give a lot of credit to Sean on this, because he's trying to broker a good compromise that works for the Smiths, works for their clientele, and works for the community. So hats off to Sean for that one, but it's kind of a tough one for me to fully agree with. But if we want to take it back to Planning Advisory Committee, I'm more than happy to look at it again. I would encourage the Smiths to continue the discussion with the neighbors, because there were a number that sent in significant concerns with the operation of the facility, and also with the suggested site-specific zoning, including comparisons to other municipalities and so forth. These weren't people just complaining they didn't want the noise of dogs and so forth. They were actually very well-reasoned, very significant and detailed arguments. And I think all of council does have, I think, Kimberly, you did forward that. We all have everything there now. But if the Smiths want to look at, bring that back and we could look at it again, I would suggest that we withdraw this motion tonight. It's not going to pass anyways, judging by, I think I can count enough to realize that. But I'm more than happy to look at it again. But I would like to take a look at it. If we're going to do it, I think it needs to be an adjustment. It shouldn't be site specific. It should be something we look at as a zoning amendment for the town. It's a new business usage for the town, and that will change some of the discussion. And if people do want it, I'm absolutely fine with it. I'm a dog owner, a dog lover. I love services like this being available if they can be done so in a proper and conscientious manner that respects the neighbors. And it looks like this one certainly does do that from what we're hearing. But again, we're talking about setting a precedent for use across town. And there's no way to avoid that when you're opening this one up. So that's my only concern, but we can bring it back for further discussion. It certainly sounds like that's the tenor this evening. So who was the mover? Was Teresa, did you move that?
Yes.
And Councillor McConnell seconded it. I would ask that maybe the best would be to pull that motion, just unless you want to push forward with it. But I would suggest that's probably the way to go tonight. And then I would suggest another motion directing that this be sent back to the Planning Advisory Committee for further discussion and deliberation. That seems to be the tenor of four of us here tonight. And I got to admit, I'm leaning that way as well, because I want to make sure that the Smiths and everyone here is given their full due consideration. Councillor Jansman, are you okay with withdrawing that?
Withdrawing what I moved to deny. Is
Yeah.
that correct? Yes, I can withdraw that.
Councillor McConnell, you're okay with that as a seconder as well? You obviously are in favor.
I just seconded it to get it on the table for discussion. I wouldn't have voted for it anyway.
Certainly, thank you. So I would suggest a motion to direct this back to the Planning Advisory Committee for further discussion and deliberation. Do I have a mover on that? Moved by Councillor Young, seconded by Councillor McConnell. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. So we will look at that further. Thank the Smiths for joining us tonight. We'll bring that back to Planning Advisory. It'll be handled over the summer at some point. I don't believe we have a meeting on the schedule right now. We do call those as needed. So we will consult with staff and we'll consider some of the options, some of the things were raised tonight. But I would really encourage the Smiths as well to anything else you have, and if you have any further comments from neighbors, particularly the ones that were opposed to it, if they want to alter their requests and change their opinions, please make sure that they have that in writing to so we have the full picture of their views if they've changed them, because we do have their written objections. So that'd be great. Any documentation you have, so we can have the fullest possible discussion about this at the next Planning Advisory Committee meeting.
Okay, will do.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Take care. Have a good night. And welcome back, Councillor Burton, who I think is, there she is. Welcome back, Leanne. So that will go back to Planning Advisory, and we'll look at scheduling something there in the weeks to come out when staff is prepared, and we give the Smiths a little bit of time as well to continue the discussion with the neighbors. So moving right along, we do have under 7.2 staff report 47-2020. That's the Prescott Proud Dollars support campaign. The recommendation being that council approve a campaign to distribute Prescott Proud Dollars to participating businesses for giveaway to loyal customers in exchange for a purchase to support business recovery during the COVID-19 pandemic, as endorsed by the Mayor's Economic Recovery Task Force. Do I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor McConnell, seconded by Councillor Jansman. Dana, do you have this one?
Yes. So Matthew and I worked on these together, but I did prepare the reports. I'm happy to speak to them. So as you know, as part of the task force, we've been looking at different strategies to provide the business community with some supports related to the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. And this was actually a great suggestion that did come from Matthew initially, to look at taking some of our Prescott Proud dollars and giving them to all participating businesses to actually give out to their customers in exchange for making a purchase. So we would also suggest that there would be a certain threshold, for example, for say a 15% in Prescott Proud dollars be given out for every purchase, and each business would receive the same amount of dollars. So the total campaign that we're proposing for this is $10,000. And we would also track the dollars. There'll be individual serial numbers on them, just so we can get a sense of what businesses, where the dollars are going, what businesses receive them, and then where they're coming in from as we're reimbursing the dollars to the businesses. So it's a really good campaign that not only benefits the businesses as well as our local residents and visitors that may be shopping here in the community, and really gets them out and supporting the local businesses wherever possible, and helps offset some of those residents that are also feeling dealing with financial struggles as a result of this pandemic.
Great, thanks very much, Dana. And I will note this was, we basically did not really a trial run, but we did offer this over last Christmas. So we've kind of gone down this road before. It was very well received at the time. Sean Lockett, who's on our economic group, strongly in favor of this at Tim Hortons. They actually saw a lot of the dollars were very popular back there, and obviously one of our bigger businesses in town. So, and I will also note that we've had other business support here as well. Northern Cables came in and bought $5,000 of the dollars right away as a fantastic shot in the arm for the program, for the community itself. We'll get that out there through Northern Cables. Been a great partner in the task force, and also, of course, they're expanding right now in Prescott as well. They've got the bigger expansion going on in Brockville, but they've been bringing significant new equipment into the new building at Prescott, their Prescott site as well. So great to see them doing so well and working with us as we try to move through the pandemic recovery phase. So open it up for comments, questions. Councilor Burton.
Thank you. I think this is a fabulous idea. What we can do as a council to help our local businesses, it's fabulous. I'm definitely going to support this. I think it's we need to help our local businesses, and this is a great way to give back to them and to help our citizens as well. So I will be in favor of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Young.
Thank you, Brett. I support it as well. We've done it a number of times, all the way back to the 80s. It was a great promotion for Christmas back at that time. The only suggestion that I'd like to add to this would be to copy the Canadian Tire dollars at Canadian Tire, where there's a box there that if you don't want to participate in collecting dollars, you can throw it in for some cause. And I'd like to suggest that the individuals set up something like that they can donate to the food bank.
Sure, that sounds like a great idea. Dana, could we look into implementing something like that with the participating businesses?
So just looking for a little bit of clarification, are you suggesting we provide each business with a device that they can have by their counter for people to donate those dollars back?
Sure. There will be some people, if especially tourists, if they wind up with a $5 Prescott dollar, $5 bill, and they're on their way out of town and they're not going to have an opportunity to spend it, they might just throw it into a box there for the food bank, or people that do support the food bank. They might do the same. It's just a suggestion.
Could we look at doing it at maybe a few key locations throughout town just to keep the cost down, so we don't have to provide a unit to all participating businesses?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That sounds great, Ray. Better than people just taking it home and having them tossed in a drawer or thrown away. So,
of course. Yep.
And this is something businesses have actively been doing, and residents. It has happened in a number of cases where residents will either give the dollars right back and say, you know, I'd like to donate this to the food bank. A lot of businesses actually have also taken their dollars and what the town would reimburse them and recommended that the town just take that money and give it directly to the food bank or other charitable causes in the community as well. So we can also add a little bit of encouragement in the description that goes out to businesses to say, you know, if they do want to look at another option, they could do that directly as a business too.
Excellent suggestion. We'll look at implementing that as soon as possible. Councilor Shaker?
I just wanted to double check. So there's 60 participating businesses in town. Dana, is that just the number of businesses that are involved through BIA, or are we trying to get all the businesses involved? If we're giving $10,000 to this town, want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to participate.
Yes, so this, and something that should be noted with this program is there's many businesses who naturally wouldn't be included, such as, you know, all of our manufacturing industries, any businesses that are in B2B services, they simply wouldn't be approached as part of this program because it's not a place where a local resident could go and necessarily purchase a product or service. So the focus for the business recruitment to this program has been retailers, personal care service providers, restaurants, businesses of that nature where a local resident or a visitor can actually exchange their dollars for a service. So that automatically eliminates a number of businesses from the program. And we are also in the process of, there's a small handful that would fall under those eligible categories that we're in the process of recruiting. So I think you'll see us get closer to about 70 businesses when it's all said and done, but that would truly cover all the eligible businesses. And that is uptown and downtown. It's not dedicated strictly to the BIA. We approach any business in Prescott who has an eligible product or service that an individual could purchase.
Great. I just wanted to make sure that if there are people watching at home, that they understand that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, great point to make sure everybody knows it's town-wide. Councilor Young, please.
And just to reinforce that attachment from the BIA, they are participating financially in this. It's not solely the town that is sponsoring the $10,000. The BIA is contributing something to that.
So we'll be approaching them. Oh, sorry, I didn't see Matthew's hand. Go ahead.
Either or, I'm sure you can both answer it.
So I just building on what Dane was going to say is we haven't approached them as of yet. We will approach them, but as kind of the previous comment was made, it's not specific to the BIA. And what we did here is actually took an administrative savings and dedicated it to being able to support this program.
And just that I saw the original motion was from the BIA, so I assumed that they were participating. In fact, the motion does say they're participating. Potential.
Yeah.
And the motion was a task force motion, Councillor Young, not a BIA motion.
Oh, thank you for pointing that out. Both those names are on the BIA. Oh, no, they're not.
Oh, Sean isn't.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, it's actually good uptown, downtown support. Then we had an uptown business move it and a downtown second it. So kind of goes to Gory's point as well that both ends of town, all commercial businesses will be eligible. And as Matt did say, my next point was going to be that just for people out there to realize this, we're still trying to be very cautious of tax dollars as well. So the $10,000 is being offset by combining two budgeted seasonal positions for admin and operations into one. So this isn't an addition to the budget as we approved. This is just shifting some dollars. Any further comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. And one more item from the task force. That's under 7.3 staff report 48-2020 small business COVID-19 grant program. The recommendation is that council approve a recommendation from the Mayor's Economic Recovery Task Force to develop a small business COVID-19 grant program in order to provide qualifying Prescott businesses with funds to offset their expenses for non-disposable health and safety equipment and materials in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and business operating guidelines. Do I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor McConnell, seconded by Councillor Jansman. I know Dana, both you and Matt worked very heavily on this, but I think it was Dana, did you write that report? So I'll turn it over to you first, please.
Thank you, Mayor Todd, through you to council. So we've been exploring, as I said, some different strategies to assist the businesses as part of the COVID-19 pandemic. And something I was exploring early on was a possibility of whether our CIP program could be amended, possibly looking at a new category to provide emergency funding to assist businesses with some of the permanent PPE supplies that they've had to install, anything from plexiglass to barriers, signage, anything that's non-disposable. A lot of our businesses have been subjected to some significant costs to renovate and ready their businesses for reopening, and in order to ensure that they are adhering to those provincial guidelines. Unfortunately, amendments, the process to amend the CIP program is lengthy. It really wouldn't have been something we could address in a timely manner. And it came to our attention that some other municipalities, for example, North Grenville and Cornwall, have partnered with the Community Future Development Corporation in their area to act as a treasurer, essentially, to establish a grant program that businesses could apply to receive some funding from the municipality to offset their costs. So that's essentially what we're proposing as part of this report. Businesses could apply to the program. It would be solely financed by the municipality. The CFD would, Grenville CFD would be approached to essentially act as the treasurer or banker in this situation, where the town would transfer the full amount of the grant to the CFDC, notify them as applications are approved, and they would look after the delivery of the funds to the individual businesses. We're proposing a grant of up to $350 to which would cover up to 50% of the business's total costs. So for example, if a business incurred $700 in expenses, we would provide up to $350. Again, that's the max. So, you know, even if they spent $1,500, the max grant that we're proposing would be $350 per business. We're anticipating we could see applications come from anywhere to 70 to 90 businesses, just depending, you know, on the nature of those that have been impacted. So our recommended allocation amount would be $15,000 for the program. And then we would also like to have the option of looking at an extension or a phase 2 if we can't satisfy the demand through the full program, or possibly even shifting some money from one program to another between the dollars in this. I think I've covered the key details. Matthew, you always seem to catch whatever I miss, so please jump in.
The only one I would add is that the 15,000 is being offset as well with some administrative changes. We're not proceeding with the joint coordinator position that was previously approved by council. That joint coordinator position with BIA and Chamber, and the ferry pilot project with Ogdensburg, of course, is not proceeding this year. So we're just shifting some money around to free up that $15,000 to help businesses. Mr. Armstrong.
Thank you very much. So the $15,000 is to get us started. If we had a large number of applicants, we have enough to cover about 43. Beyond that, then certainly we'd have to look at other options. So we'd like to see what the feedback is, and then to make further recommendations based on what comes in.
I will note, like, this was something the task force, everyone was very much eager to get out there as an assistance for, especially the smaller businesses, the people that have to, you know, put up those plexiglass shields, buy some of that extra equipment to outfit their counters and so on. And that's obviously adding up, especially for the small single owner businesses, especially in the downtown, but elsewhere as well. This was seen as a way to really to help them directly. And Dana did touch on this, but this was actually, I think I had calls from friends as far away as Pembroke asking about how you could work with this, as everyone was looking at maybe in addition to the CIP, but it actually is not only a timely issue, it was deemed to be essentially against bonusing with the province as well. So there were other complications in terms of just adding this to the CIP. So we did check with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, and we had Michael Jiggins, of course, with MPP Steve Clark's office, who was on our meeting a couple weeks ago. And this was the suggested way to go. And of course, we have the great people here at Grenville CFDC who are working with North Grenville now on theirs, and now working with us on this. So we've set up a good way to deliver the money that is fully approved by the minister and the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. So I think it's a good program, and I think it'll help some people in really struggling right now in terms of how they respond to COVID. So open it up for comments and questions. Councillor Young, please.
I think it's a great idea. I think part of the problem with individual small businesses is finding a source for these plexiglass dividers. Obviously, the banks and Canadian Tire and Loblaws were ordering thousands of them at a time and then sending them out to each branch. If there was any way we could secure a certain style that would be appropriate for everyone and buy a quantity of them, that would help reduce the cost too. I mean, a small store searching for one item, you know, they're going to pay an awful lot. They'll pay more in transportation than anything else, you know. So it's any way we can help like that, I think we should try it.
That actually was raised that evening, and Dana's jumping in with the hand up quickly there. There are a number of local suppliers that are offering the option right in our area. We had Ann Weir on that call as well with United Counties, and we've been working with counties to establish suppliers, so everybody, we can get it out there who has the material in stock and so on. And people have been pretty creative. I'm not going to name specific businesses, but there are a couple right in Brockville and around Prescott that are offering this. Not the plexiglass, but it's a slightly different material that works really well for small business owners and countertops. So yeah, Dana, did you have anything more on that?
Yeah, just something I wanted to know is we did look at that, but what we found is the requirement varies so much from business to business. It was too hard to kind of come up with that standard unit that was going to work for everyone. So that's why we really just relied on the PPE list, making sure that we're communicating that to businesses. I can say, you know, these meetings are public, and I can tell you the MD Signs here in Prescott does have some plexiglass available. So that is a local provider that some of our businesses have been able to take advantage of. So if anyone is listening that is looking for that, I would suggest giving them a call. But you're right, they are getting very low in quantities as well. A lot of the other providers on that list have already been depleted and are looking at August restocking. So even if they don't have it now, we're hoping that they will in the next few weeks and can accommodate those needs as they continue to arise.
Especially with restaurants looking at the reopening, and at some point, that's obviously going to be an extreme expense. I would think they would retrofitting their facilities, the smaller crowds, the shields, and so on. So, but we do have a list. We don't recommend obviously any business directly, but we do have lists and can provide that list of suppliers to any business that's interested and work with them with regards to the program as well to try to hook them up with good, affordable suppliers of the products. Thanks, Dana.
And that list is available on our website. So anyone who's listening can go directly to our website and download the full list. There's a number of providers throughout Leeds, Grenville County of all types of PPE supplies.
Thanks for raising that, Ray. That's an excellent point, because it doesn't mean anything if they can't get the material or it's so expensive that they can't afford it. Other comments, questions? Councillor McConnell.
I think anything that we can do to shift money around that we are not going to spend this year, but we've actually taxed for, rather than seeing it wind up in reserves and used to some future date, if we can help our local businesses out now, that's what we should do. And I think this is an excellent suggestion, which is why I had my hand up right off the bat. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor McConnell. Any further comments? Seeing none, then we'll go back to the motion and call the question. All in favor? Motion is approved. Thanks, everyone. And 7.4, staff report 49-2020, stormwater directional improvements. A couple of items here in this report. The recommendation reads that council approve the installation of a curb in the south side of Water Street at Sophia Street and the removal of the sidewalk and installation of an asphalt swale on Hyde Street at Sophia Street to improve the flow of road stormwater so that it flows towards the stormwater collection system at a total cost of $30,000. Do I have a mover, please? Councilor Ostrander, seconded by Councilor McConnell. Matthew, take it away, please.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen for a moment, just so that it's a little bit easier to explain when you're looking at the picture as opposed to going from there. So just bear with me for 1 second. So hopefully right now you're able to see Hyde Street. Is that correct?
No, just see your menus screen. It's not up yet.
Okay.
Can just see the ability to select the Adobe Acrobat, the PDFs.
Okay. Let me try something a little bit different.
There we go.
There we go.
Okay, very good.
That's Hyde Street.
Yep. So what you're seeing in front of you is Hyde Street, and it's the further west end of Hyde Street that leads to Sophia. So what we're taking a look at and what we're suggesting here is the removal of the sidewalk. As you can see, the sidewalk is in bad shape. It's level with the street or even a little bit lower. And this naturally flows down to Sophia. So there's a large gravel parking lot. If you were to see it in the bottom left-hand corner here, it's draining out into the street onto these sidewalk panels, and then it just kind of sits and pools there. So we worked with our contractor to come up with some options as to how we could get the water to move down to Sophia Street and into the storm system, because there is no storm here on this portion of Hyde Street. And what they came up with was a removal of the sidewalk and reinstallation of asphalt that has a small swale in it. And so it will be similar to a curb, but kind of the width of the sidewalk here running all the way down to Sophia, and that way it will not pool anymore and move in the proper direction. So total cost for this one is a little in excess of $21,000. And really it's to try and deal with this pooling issue, as well as this is the only house on Hyde Street that that sidewalk accesses. And so the feeling is that it's not an essential sidewalk, and therefore we could actually use that portion as the area to get rid of the stormwater and down to Sophia. The second one has to do with the individual that owns the house on the corner of Water and Sophia Street, which is the road where we will be repaving this year. I reached out and had mentioned that with how the road goes and the natural slope of the road, and the fact that it's even with the grass, is that it's the water every time it rains inundates his front lawn and up to the house. And so again, we worked with our contractors.
That's why it's so green.
Good point. So we again worked with our contractor, and they came up with the installation of a curb would be more appropriate in this particular situation. Again, it will force the direction of the water down to Sophia Street. There's a catch basin at the bottom of Sophia to catch storm water, so that's not an issue. And this would be deemed the most appropriate treatment in this case. So the cost for this is approximately $8,200, I believe. And so grand total of the two together is a little under $30,000. So what we did is we took a look to see if there was any money in the budget where we could help support these improvements. And we found about $14,000 in the sewer operational storm sewer budget. And then we would recommend that the other $15,600 come from the fiscal policy reserve. So more than happy to address any questions, and I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thanks very much, Mr. Armstrong, for that report. Open it up for comments, questions. I see Councillor Shanker with his hand up. Please.
Sorry, Matthew, just for that house with the nice green lawn, are you putting a curb there, an asphalt curb or a cement curb?
It would be a concrete curb, the length from all the way from Sophia to just on the west side of the municipal parking lot. So it runs the full north end of that property.
And I don't remember, is that one of the roads that we were thinking that we would have to address at some point soon?
So we are repaving this road this year. And so that's one of the reasons the homeowner reached out and said, are you going to be doing the curb at the same time? So we hadn't intended to. So in that case, we worked with our contractor, found a solution. And then before we start repaving it, thought we'd bring it before council for consideration.
Okay, I just didn't want us to do something and then have to do something another year from now. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Shanker. Other comments, questions? Councillor Young.
I'm not sure I understand the Hyde Street project completely. So all I will say is that homeowner has a very difficult time with the transports at Trillium. So I hope whatever we do there improves the situation and not makes it worse and not make it worse.
We believe that it will improve the situation, yes.
Okay. So you can see he's got barriers there to keep the trucks off his lawn. You know, so whatever, if we just asphalt it flat or with a little swale, as you say, the trucks will continue to drive up on his lawn, which isn't good for anyone.
So when it was looking at being constructed, it would actually create a little bit of a natural divot and a curb up, which the intention there is when you hit that, the truck will actually stop in motion because it's traveling so slow at that point. So it becomes a natural barrier as opposed to right now where you can drive over the sidewalk and there is no lip.
Right, okay, good.
Thank you very much, Councillor Young. Councillor McConnell, please.
I've actually spoken to that homeowner a number of times, and he's in a situation that his house was there long before the warehouse across the road, and the warehouse across the road would have never been allowed to be built in its exact size today that it was a few years ago, because a few years ago transports and trailers were maximum, or trailers were a maximum of 48 feet. Today they're 53. And if you stand and watch a lot of those guys pulling in there, they got these massive sleepers on the back. So they're huge units. But I have stood there and watched somebody with one of those huge units back in between two other trailers and not come upon the sidewalk in front of this man's house. So it can be done, but you've got a variety of quality of drivers, and some of them are not that good. So they pull ahead, and he's had them in his driveway, he's had them up in his lawn. The sidewalk is all cracked to hell, and I suspect the weight of the front of those trucks has got a lot to do with it. Those two cement barriers that he's got there, I suspect may wind up on the lawn side of that swale rather than the roadside, because if you can't make it in with your trailer and you're in the pit of that swale, you're going to pull ahead and then you're going to be on his lawn. So I don't know it's going to cure that part of the situation, but his other complaint was the water running off of that parking lot, which was dirty water because it was coming off gravel, and it pools in front of his driveway, and he tries to keep his property decent, and then he's got all kinds of dirt tracking in the driveway. And so this at the very least is going to cure the water situation, and hopefully it won't make the other situation worse. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor McConnell. Further comments, questions this evening on that item? Councillor Burton, please.
Thank you. I'm not too sure if I'm going to support this motion tonight. It is a lot of money. Is there a way that the company can slant the asphalt when they're redoing the road, so we won't have to? It would eliminate that problem of pooling the water. I'm not a contractor, so I'm not too sure. But I know when you redo your driveway in your home, they slant it, make sure that it's slanted away from your house so the water doesn't pool near your house. Now, would be a time and money savings, I think, if we were able to do something like that. Is that possible?
So that was one of the things that we took a look at. Unfortunately, with streets, you have them naturally crown in the middle and then work off to the sides. And so there's no way to get this entire street to basically work uphill, because if you take a look at Sophia, you're constantly going uphill at that point. And so you would end up working against gravity, unfortunately, as water comes across, both water and stormwater. And so we did take a look at what we could provide, and really the curb was the only way to kind of deal with that crowning and then move it off onto Sophia. Otherwise, if we don't crown it, then it would end up pooling in the middle of the street itself. And then that's not going to work for anybody as well.
Thank you for the clarification. Better understanding now. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burton. Any further comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question then. All in favor? Motion is passed. Thanks, everyone. And 7.5, that's staff report 50-2020. That's park improvements and updates. The recommendation reads that council improve 1, the installation of an irrigation system for Riverwalk Park at an approximate cost of $17,000 to support the staff recommendations on improving the look and usability of the park area. 2, the creation and implementation of an adopt a garden plot program to involve volunteers throughout the town of Prescott to participate in the maintenance of the plethora of town gardens that make Prescott an enjoyable place to live, work, and visit. And 3, the reinstallation of the Jonathan Noonan Memorial on the west side of the Playground of Angels. That's, of course, at Centennial. So if I could have a mover, please. Moved by Councillor Burton. Seconder? Seconded by Councillor Young. He just beat you, Gory. So I'll turn that over to Matt to go through the particulars of that report, please. Mr. Armstrong.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So I'm just going to walk through each of the separate ones one by one, and then we can try to address it in totality. So in terms of Riverwalk Park, we have heard some kind of concerns around the state of Riverwalk Park, and staff was asked to take a look to see how we can improve it. So now that we've kind of lived with it for a few years, we understand it better, how we operate that park and maintain it. And one of the things that we found is that not having a pressured water source is a major detriment to being able to keep the grass up and the gardens. So what we reached out to several vendors to find what possible solutions, and it ranges somewhere in the neighborhood of $17,000 to install a direct from the so I think it's from the marina side that it would be a pump be installed there. An automated system would be installed and then run throughout the park. So we feel that is kind of the number one improvement that we can make. It would cover the entire grass area in the gardens. We would pick up the flagstone and save it for once all the updates have been made, return the flagstone to where it is today. We would use one of our rake implements that is a pull behind and kind of loosen up all of the topsoil. From there, we would have staff remove all the grass, dead grass, as well as hand raking as necessary. Once the irrigation system is in place and we've pulled up or kind of turned over all of the sod, then using high quality seed and dressing it with soil as appropriate, and then regular watering. Watering and fertilizing program is key to being able to rejuvenate this park area and really make it something that we can all be proud of. And so that's kind of our step number 6. Number 7, and again, we asked Mr. Phil Burton, who's on staff, who's kind of our in-house horticultural expert, for his recommendations. And he said being able to provide a little bit of shade in that park would be fantastic. Again, looking at perhaps trees, umbrellas, pergolas, some shade sail, and that sort of thing that you're seeing them a little bit more common. So we would take a look at that. Removal of the false spireas that currently fill a lot of the gardens down there, and replacing them with more attractive plantings and something with a little bit more color. Removing the 3 gardens at the foot of Center Street. And this is due to the fact that when we're removing snow in the winter, it creates major problems having those gardens where they are. So the suggestion would be remove the gardens, put in interlocking stone, and actually replace it with picnic tables to provide more seating in that area. And then finally, removing the pea stone that's in the ship play structure, because it's migrating itself all over the park. And it's not easy to pick up. It's not easy to rake up or that sort of thing. And so just replacing it with some other options that are out there, which is also rubber, or I think there's now a natural bark material that is also usable for playgrounds. And that sort of thing, even if it migrates, it breaks down in terms of the natural bark. So it doesn't cause that long-term issue where pea gravel continues flying around every time you cut the grass. So those are the recommendations for the Riverwalk Park. We would see that if approved, we would get that underway and hopefully get a good start this year, and then be in great shape for bringing it back to full beauty next spring. The Adopt a Garden Plot program, again, is something that staff was asked to take a look at, and we talked to Mr. Phil Burton, who's on staff, and he thought, creating a program where town, other businesses, organizations, or homeowners would like to adopt a garden plot that's planted by the town. They would work with Mr. Burton and kind of do the initial planting, and then be responsible for weeding and watering and just taking a general care of the garden on a week-to-week basis. We've actually piloted this program with one of our staff members, and doing a fantastic job, and it is looking really great. So, so we thank Lindsay Veltkamp for that, and it was so far so good. And so we'd like to kind of expand that, formalize that program, and really kind of endorse it. We start this year. Obviously, planting is already long on its way, but kind of starting it this year and then bringing it more into fruition for next year. And one of the major tenets of the Community in Blue program is getting the community involved, and we see this as being an excellent opportunity for that. Finally, we have the Noonan Memorial in Centennial Park. We had to relocate that temporarily for where we were putting the splash pad. This spring, or just a few weeks ago, they reached out and asked that instead of installing it north of the splash pad, if we would consider reinstalling it west of the playground structure. So certainly we went down, took a look. We don't have any particular issues with that from a staff perspective, and I'm more than happy to be able to do that. A couple of the requests that were made, one is that the original memorial stone has faded over the years, and so Prescott Memorials has generously offered to donate 50% of the cost of the new stone. Each year we put a small amount into the budget to replace plaques and memorial items, and so the cost for that is about $650, which I'm suggesting we can cover from our internal operations budget. Also, we did move the tree, the memorial tree, and we're not suggesting moving it again, but the family was happy with just putting a plaque at the tree, noting its significance. And so we're, again, more than happy to add that as well. So I think it's a good news item. It be able to relocate it where the family wishes, and then make a couple of improvements to it as we move forward. So that's my report. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Matthew, for this. And I know that I know Councilor Burton will join me in this one. And the irrigation system for Riverwalk is going to be much appreciated if it does pass this evening. And just that was, and Leanne will remember this one very well as well. This was actually the irrigation system pretty sure we actually even approved in that subcommittee way back when, but when we had the issues with the contractor, everything sort of went into limbo there for a couple of years. So it's good to see this being brought forward, because I'm pretty sure this is exactly what we looked at before, raising the paving stone on that side, going underneath, and installing the pump on the side wall over by the marina. So this is all sounds really good. The only other comment I would make before I'll turn it over is on item 3, that's fantastic to reinstall the Jonathan Noonan Memorial. And it's not really for tonight's discussion, but I would, and I've mentioned this to Matthew in the past, some sort of memorial garden, tree, whatever a program like we have had that historically at the marina with the trees and the plaques there. We have had it with the benches. I think we do need some sort of memorial program like that, whether it, whatever it happens to be, whether it's benches, trees, brushes, some combination of all of the above. I think we should be looking at that for next year as well. But we obviously have some time there, and I think it's excellent what's being proposed here with both the adopted garden and the Jonathan Noonan Memorial. So anyways, sorry, I just wanted to make that one comment. Councilor Burton, I think you had your hand up there.
Yes, thank you. I am over the moon joyed that we're finally going to get an irrigation system if approved tonight. The park has always been, in my opinion, the forgotten park, because staff hasn't really had the time and we didn't have an irrigation system there. So the grass is always not done very well at all, and the plants as well. I would like to definitely add in the park some low maintenance trees to add some shade. Maybe we could take out some of the gardens as suggested by Mr. Phil Burton, and maybe some Japanese maple or dogwoods in there that is low maintenance for staff. I do like the recommendation taking out the smaller gardens and just putting interlocking there. And removing of the peas stone. I think that's a good idea as well. I do have an issue because we did look at, Mayor Todd remembers, we did look at putting the rubberization underneath the play structure, but the cost of that was just through the roof. So that's why we went with peas stone, but maybe something as in the wood chips that are in the other parks around town, that might be a little bit easier to handle for staff. But I do like the recommendations because staff is the ones that are doing the work and looking after the park. And if they say there's too many gardens down there and Mr. Phil Burton wants to jazz it up, I think it's important to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor Burton. Open it up for comments, questions from the rest of the group this evening. Councilor McConnell, please.
Thank you, Mayor Todd. I walk through there at least once a day, and in all honesty, I find it a shame. Councilor Burton come up with a name for the park, Riverwalk Park, and I think it's a very apt title because people walk by the river and not in the park. The center part of that park is unused. It could just as easily have been called the concrete park. There is so much cement in that park. It was an excellent design that Joe McFarland did for that park originally, but unfortunately, when we looked at how much it was going to cost us, we whack so much out of it that what's left doesn't really reflect the original design. And so what's there, unfortunately, doesn't seem to have much value park-wise. Originally, there was going to be a boat at the head of that long concrete, which would have brought everybody down through there. That was cut, and that just kind of ruined the whole thing. But there are other things in that park that need to be addressed, and if we're going to look at doing something, then maybe we should look at doing something more. the last 2 times that we've had the high water, there's been significant damage to the walkway at the south side of that park. The way the park is designed, if you take a look at it, there are, I think, 5 benches, if I remember correctly, of the original benches. These aren't the ones that we put in after. These were the original design benches. And if you take a look at that, the front of them are actually 5 feet out from the back of the walkway. 5 feet. So that's 5 feet of that walkway that's unused because there are benches in the road. If we moved those benches to the back of that walkway as the new ones have been installed, we could actually carve 5 feet off the front of that walkway and still have the same amount of walking space, so that when we have the high water, we're not going to get the same damage to the interlock, so it wouldn't have to be repaired all the time. I talked to Phil when he was cleaning out the flower beds that he's talking about taking out completely, and that's really at the front of the parking lot area. And at the time, they were full of gravel that had been washed up, waves coming up. They were full of stuff that had been plowed off. They were just a mess, and he said we should take them out, and I agreed. Taking those out and moving that walkway back would do the same thing that I suggested further along. It would provide for a lot less damage when we get high water, if we get high water. Trees have been mentioned. Whenever I think of a park, I think of 2 words, grass and trees, and both are missing down there. Grass we can put back. There were ornamental trees put in, but they're small ornamental trees and they really don't provide any shade, and they never will provide any shade, and they still have their place down there. But we need trees. We need trees that are going to grow. We need trees that are going to provide shade that you can put picnic tables under, and the people are going to sit there and enjoy it. Without shade, the park is never going to be utilized to its full. And I realize I probably just lost every vote from the people that lived in the Mariners Club apartment building, because it is to a certain extent going to block their view. However, when we spend $3.2 million on a park, it's for the town of Prescott, not for one building. The park was built as a consequence of an agreement that was made when that building was built. But a park is a park. It should have grass. It should have shade. And let's face it, the leaves are only on for 6 months of the year. For the rest of the year, you can look through the trees. But I firmly believe trees must go in that park. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor McConnell. Other comments? Seeing nothing further, I just want to commend staff on bringing this forward, and the idea of added landscaping down there, trees, whatever we can do to make it a little more. It is hot, but one thing I will say, it is also incredibly well used. That parking lot is filled virtually all the time right now with people grabbing lunch, grabbing coffee. It's become a very popular destination spot with COVID, both there and the parking area in front of Prescott Place. And also, I do see a lot of people using those picnic tables. Would we have more use if we can get some added shade? The sail idea that Matt's talking about to enhance the nautical feel as well, the trees, however we can do it. The only caution I would make in terms of trees and fuller and more mature growth is that is still built on an ash, as Bob Lawn always called it, the asphalt wasteland, and it really was for a long time. And we just have to make sure what we put in there is not going to suffer the same fate as, say, some of our trees on King Street, which are experiencing some issues in a few areas now because they're not really the right types of trees for in the middle of the concrete that they're in. So absolutely, if we can get some more recommendations on that and anything else with Riverwalk to make it more amenable and more usable by residents overall, I do think that it's been a very successful park in many ways. It was never going to be centennial. It was never going to have a certain amount of amenities that some of the other parks have simply because of the size. But absolutely, Lee's correct. If we can get some trees, some shade, whatever we can get down there, I think we can make it even more amenable for people, especially in these hot summer days like we're experiencing right now. So with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carried. And Matthew, can I ask that irrigation system? I mean, really, it probably should have been installed yesterday with this hot weather, but do we have a timeline on when we'll be looking at the work down there?
So we'll get it ordered this week. It probably takes a couple of weeks for the stuff to come in. So my guess is probably sometime in August.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And we'll be, if we could get a quick update report on that at the August meeting, whether it's just a verbal or not, because it obviously is, we've had some offline discussions, Councilor Burton, myself, and other members of council with staff. It's an important matter. So if you could bring it back and just give us a quick update when you get a chance. Thank you. So moving on, item 7.6, this is staff report 51-2020, the Maitland to Prescott Economic Development Study and Strategy. This is what we brought forward right before the COVID sort of knocked the world off its axis back in March. This is coming forward tonight, and it's also being the exact same report in motion is in front of Augusta this evening as well. So the recommendation is that council direct town staff to develop and issue a joint request for proposal, RFP, with the Township of Augusta to 1, conduct a development study for the lands with the outer boundaries being County 15 to the west, the St. Lawrence River to the south, County Road 26 to the north, and the municipal boundaries of Augusta and Prescott to the east, and 2, prepare an economic development strategy. And Matthew did issue a report on this, and I'll ask him to speak to it in a moment. But if I could ask for a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Jansman, and second, I think Councillor Shankar just beat Julianne. So Mr. Armstrong, please, I want to take us through the report and where we are with the timeline with that and what's being proposed for the RFP.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. So if you remember, back a year ago, the Ministry of Municipal Affairs gave the town, as well as many municipalities throughout Ontario, modernization funding. And with that, the aim was to look towards the longer term, either being able to save through creating efficiencies or by growing the tax base. And so certainly we're working on a service delivery plan with our partners in Augusta, and that's moving along fairly well. And then this is the other side of it, taking a look at developing lands and how we could do that in coordination between Augusta and Prescott. So it's very much a multidisciplinary type of study, as well as strategy development. It goes all the way over to Maitland and Highway 15 north to Highway 26, and then to the town boundaries, both for Augusta and Prescott on the east side. So running along the bottom, obviously the St. Lawrence River is our southern boundary and provides a natural stopping point. So we'll be taking a look at the current infrastructure, and so that's looking at the road network, electricity capacity, natural gas, water and sewer services, stormwater management facilities, telecommunications, broadband infrastructure, and cellular capabilities. Some of these we've been working with through EORN, and so have a clear understanding what the future might look like. But others, even after the EORN project for broadband, I think there's still areas that don't necessarily receive high-speed internet, and so certainly that is something that we'd wanted to take a look at through this study. Current land and water use availability, so residential, agricultural, commercial, industrial, buried infrastructure, including pipelines. So we know that there is a significant natural gas pipeline that runs just north of the town of Prescott. Then surface infrastructure such as railroads. Obviously, we're on the main Windsor-Quebec corridor, and then publicly owned lands. Finally, taking a look at the infrastructure servicing options and whether that's providing water infrastructure from the town of Prescott or having capacity to do that in Augusta. Also from a sewer and wastewater perspective, what is the right mix of expanding our system versus private or communal systems? Extension of the road network and an extension of rail networks and crossings. So all of this kind of leads us into developing an economic strategy that takes a look at the transportation side, land use and zoning, property tax-based growth, as well as consideration of best practices, and really working between the two municipalities so that they're compatible in being able to attract business and growth in those areas. So the timeline would be developing the RFP in the course of July. This, I believe, is going to Augusta Township Council this evening with the exact same timelines. Augusta, we would issue the RFP and receive tenders. September, we would take the time to evaluate the tenders and in October award the contract. November through March, actually undertake the study and prepare the strategy, and then implement the strategy from April onward. So stakeholders are very key in this and getting public feedback, commercial and industrial businesses and landowners, working with the United Counties. Obviously, Township of Augusta is a two-tier municipality and a lower tier, and so we do need to coordinate with the United Counties, the funding agencies such as Grenville Community Futures, to name one, and residents and residential developers. In terms of the financial implications, we would see this costing no more than $150,000, shared equally between Township of Augusta and Town of Prescott. And we have yet to spend any of the money that we received, which was $591,400. So our share would be approximately $75,000 or less. So that's the report. We see it as a natural next step as we're taking a look at expenses, also taking a look at opportunities for development, and then being able to really work together with our neighboring municipality and see how that we can partner on some of those attractions, as well as in the natural case of things, Prescott has services and some of our neighbors have land. So that's really taking a look at that opportunity and being able to do something that's beneficial for both. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Armstrong. And I just want to thank our friends in Augusta. We've developed a really solid partnership, particularly over the last year, but it's been many years in the making. They supported us with the arena, of course. We are trying to work together as closely as possible, service delivery and now economic development as well. I think that's what the people seem to want. It's definitely what the government wants, given that's exactly what the modernization money was rolled out for projects like this, to aid with efficiencies and to aid with economic development overall. And the one thing I did want to say is this isn't just a study, and I know everybody says this all the time, so I'm sure some people will take it with a grain of salt, but this isn't going to be a study to sit on a shelf. There's going to be very serious actions to roll out from this, and it also is going to take into account some of the opportunities that we have right now in both Prescott and Augusta. So it's not just pie in the sky, blue sky thinking in this report. It's going to be some very actionable items. So with that, I'll open it up for comments, questions, and discussion for members of council tonight. Councilor McConnell, please.
Thank you, Mayor Todd. This report, investigation, whatever you want to call it, is going to take in from our western boundary to Maitland Road, and up to the second concession and down to number 2 highway. But why wouldn't we stretch that eastern boundary, which is our western boundary, to include both of our industrial parks? Because it seems to me this is going to be a very detailed report, and it's going to wind up in the hands of people who may be interested in investing either in housing or industry or commercial in that area. So why wouldn't we want to have the available property that we have as part of that report, especially when we're paying for part of it?
But just as a point of clarification, it is to our eastern boundary, not our western boundary.
Ah, okay. Did I make that mistake, or is it in there?
I'm hoping it's in there, and if it's not, then as a point of clarification, it's definitely our eastern boundary.
It could very well be me. I read our western boundary, but it could be my misreading. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor McConnell. Other comments, questions? Councilor Jansman.
I just think that this is really quite exciting. If growth is going to happen in years to come, it's going to be with this type of partnership. So that's great. Exciting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor Jansman. Councilor Shankar, please.
I just want to say that, just for the record, that it's great that we're using that money that we got from the province, and I think we should kind of make a big deal out of it and let Clark and Jiggins know that we are starting to spend that money, and we're spending it for a good reason.
Trust me, they're watching.
Okay, good.
Yeah, when we launched it that day as well, I talked to Steve extensively before that just to clear that this was a good use of the funding, and he confirmed that it was, and we brought him up that day at the Augusta Mayor's Breakfast as well to share in the announcement of the initial planning. So absolutely, we'll get them involved in this as well. And I think it's definitely we were getting some push. A lot of municipalities have not used this funding yet, and the province has been encouraging municipalities quite strongly to start using it for the purposes that it was given out for. Any further discussion? Seeing none, so I'll call the question. All in favor? And I didn't want to say this in advance to prejudice the discussion, but Augusta did approve this tonight unanimously as well. So it looks like we've got a partnership, and we'll be going forward with the RFP shortly, according to Mr. Armstrong's timeline. So thanks, everyone, and thanks again to our partners in Augusta for working with us so extensively and so well on this. And we, of course, had the arena project as well. We can't, certainly our residents haven't forgotten that. Want to let everyone know we haven't forgotten it as well. It's been delayed with COVID, but that's another big part of our partnership ongoing with the Township of Augusta. And hopefully we'll have some more information on that we can share with the public shortly. But right now we're still in a little bit of limbo waiting for announcements on the grant funding. So moving on to 7.7, Staff Report 52-2020, our video surveillance policy. The recommendation being that council approve the video surveillance policy and the establishing bylaw for implementation. Do I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Young, seconded by Councillor Jansman. Mr. Armstrong, I've read the report, but I'm not sure who did that. Kimberly, was it you or Matt?
Sure, I wrote the report in coordination with Matthew. I can give a quick overview. It's pretty straightforward. Through you, Mr. Todd, Mayor Todd. We have a number of surveillance systems, video cameras that have been installed in the past year, 2020. And before we begin operating these systems, we need to put in a policy. We need to have a town policy put in place that just speaks to the collection and disposal, records retention, notification signage, so that we meet our legislative requirements with the Information and Privacy Commissioner of Ontario through the INFIPA Act. So this policy lays it out. It's pretty straightforward. Gananoque actually just approved a similar policy within the last month, I believe. So it takes us in line with all the legislation as well as the Human Rights Code and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So if anyone has any questions.
Certainly, I'll open it up. I will note the locations are mentioned in the report. Some are around the marina, where we did have some security issues and some car broken into issues last summer. So this is to address some of that. One of the cameras I believe we're going to be setting up as a public webcam as well, Mr. Armstrong. Is that correct on the White House?
Yes, so we are intending on installing that, not part of this particular project, but as part of a separate one. But certainly we would like to be able to show people beautiful St. Lawrence and what Prescott has to offer, and trying to do that from the lighthouse top of it.
Yeah, it seems like a nice tourism boost with the other riverside municipalities that do it. Sorry, I thought that was here. And just, of course, the other item, of course, is the Pride Crosswalk. The one location is there. That'll probably be the headline here on this one, but it obviously is tied in with the other areas as well, where we received some complaints and some concerns there through the OPP and some boaters last year as well. So we're looking at addressing some of those issues in the marina area as well. So with that, I'll open it up for comments and questions. Councillor Ostrander and then Councillor Burton, please.
Yeah, well, it's nice to see us getting a policy in place for that. These are a great investigation tool and court evidence if needed. Sometimes you hope you never need them, but quite often you do in wide open spaces such as the harbor you mentioned, the park areas and that. Little traffic, but sometimes a lot of things go on there that shouldn't. So nice to have it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ostrander. Councillor Burton, please.
Thank you. Just a couple questions, if I may. How are we going to police these cameras? And with staff timing, And if there is a problem, especially on Highway 2, where we have our Pride sidewalk, that is a very heavy traffic area, I would say 90% of the time. So how are we going to police these kind of high traffic areas to see if there's incidents or not? Thank you.
Mr. Armstrong?
So in terms of how it just becomes a passive system. So there's not going to be somebody looking at it every day unless there's an incident. And so if there's damage to at the marina or at the crosswalk, that's when we would actually go through and review the data and take a look to see actually when it occurred and pass any pertinent information on to the police. So that's kind of the process we do. It's not that somebody would go and look at it every day unless there was some type of incident that requires it to be looked at. So certainly we're cognizant of people's privacy, and it's not used as an active system in any way. And it's more there to safeguard when something does happen, to be able to address that issue and make sure that that we structure in a way that doesn't occur again.
Thank you very much, Mr. Armstrong. Further comments, questions? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thanks, everyone. So we've got a couple more items. I think we can hopefully plow through these, well, reasonably quickly. The one may take some discussion, of course, and then we'll call a quick break. But these first few items here, I think should go relatively quickly, and then we will have a recess once we get to the end of the open session. So under 8 resolutions, we have a couple resolutions there. These are items that arose from the task force working with United Counties and our other political partners in the area to try to push forward some priorities that were raised by our members. I want to particularly thank our task force member, Dave Annable, for really advocating here and doing some good work. So the recommendation reads, and this is a long one, the first recommendation under 8.1 is employer and employee funding program revisions. The recommendation reads, whereas the Canadian economy has been drastically impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, with provincially mandated business restrictions and closures resulting in limited operations, employee layoffs, and financial hardships, and whereas the federal and provincial governments put in place funding and grant programs such as the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, CEWS, Canada Emergency Response Benefit, CERB, and the Ontario Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program, OCE-CRA, to assist employers and employees during this unprecedented time. And whereas the province of Ontario is now in stage 2 of reopening under the COVID-19 state of emergency, but the various funding programs have not been revised to support the reopening process, therefore it be resolved that the Council of the Town of Prescott advocates for getting employees and employers back to work by requesting that the provincial and federal government implement the following program revisions. The first one is on the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, CEWS, revisions to adjust eligibility requirements currently restricting some businesses. And the second one, a Canada Emergency Response Benefit, CERB, revisions to provide an incentive for employees and businesses to return to operations quickly and safely. And the third one, Ontario Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program, OCE-CRA, revisions to ensure commercial tenants receive available net rent reduction supports available through this program despite program uptake by commercial property owners, and that council and staff of the Town of Prescott work with the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses, the municipalities in the United Counties of Leeds and Grenville, and the Eastern Ontario Mayor's Caucus to advocate on behalf of small and medium independent businesses to help them and their employees return to work and start the economic recovery process, and that a copy of this resolution be sent to MP Michael Barrett, MPP Steve Clark, and all Leeds and Grenville municipalities. Do I have someone willing to make that motion to endorse that recommendation? Councillor Jansman, seconded by Councillor Ostrander. Any discussion? I will say we tried to walk a line here to represent both employers and employees. While this has been a major topic of discussion with the task force, with a number of area employers having difficulties with staffing right now, which has been an issue. And while we do realize that employees have their own concerns about getting back to work as well, again, we're trying to sort of walk the line there and encourage revisions that sort of respect both the employer's ability to get the business up and running again, and the employee's ability to work and live safely in the work environment. So that's kind of in a nutshell what it is. Councillor McConnell, please.
Mayor Todd, there was something that's just not quite clear to me, and perhaps you could just read a couple sentences there again, and it relates to rent for tenants, and then you referred something to the building owner as well there. Could you just read that section again, please?
Sure, yeah, that's on the Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program, revisions to ensure commercial tenants receive available rent reduction supports available through this program. Despite program uptake by commercial property owners, we had heard a number of complaints because the property owners actually have to endorse this, not the leaseholders, and so in large part, you've got businesses operating in the rented spaces where the owners of those businesses do not want to apply for the rent subsidy. So the business owner ends up sort of taking it on the chin and having to pay the rent through this, where this program was designed to allow business owners to have support with the rents. I think at one point we had, Dana, correct me on this, or Matt, there was only 10 to 20% of uptake, but that has since increased with the province. I know Premier Ford really promoted this at one point, and I think it's gotten better, but it still was raised as a significant concern.
Yeah, with the recent change, with the government basically restricting commercial tenant evictions, that has really resulted in some increased uptake on the program. I had a great conversation with Jacqueline Aaron at CFIB, and she did confirm that we are seeing some improved uptake. There are definitely still some case-by-case issues with this program. As you mentioned, Mayor Todd, the biggest issue is the fact that it's the commercial property owner that has to apply for them and both the commercial tenant to receive the benefit, which has created some issues, hesitancy among some commercial property owners in applying, because once again, it is a loan-based program, and it is understandable why some property owners are averse to applying, because they aren't in a position necessarily to take on this debt.
And we discussed this at a couple of the meetings, and we were a little kind of trying to walk a fine line with that one as well, because we don't want to get involved with the property owners, maybe very legitimate reasons not to want to use the program. But we did try to come down at something where we encourage more use of it, because it was being seen as a real issue with a number of small business owners. Again, I want to thank Dave Annable for raising this one and working. He does a lot of work with Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses, and obviously we're in touch with them now through Dana. So we're getting good information and trying to relay some of the small and medium-sized business concerns. That make it clear, Lee? It's
yeah. So if I've got it right, Mayor Todd, what you're trying to do here is emphasize more use of the program the way it is, rather than the tenants being able to apply for this themselves. Is that am I reading that right?
Yeah, yes, just a little more, because I think some of it was, as Dana mentioned, I think some of the reluctance was based on a lack of knowledge and how the program was, because I mean, there's so many things coming at property owners and business owners right now from all sides that we wanted to encourage more discussion about it. I think it's already been somewhat successful, because I think the number shot up to 60% or more actually after those last couple meetings, but I could be wrong on that, but I know it was a dramatic uptick on that. So yeah, that's exactly right, Councilor McConnell.
Thank you, Mayor Todd.
Any further discussion? Seeing no, I'll call the question. All in favor? Thanks, everyone. And we'll forward that on. If I could ask Dana, because I did get a note from Ann Weir the other day about that for next steps of coordinating that with the other municipalities. So if you could let Dana know, let Ann know that we approve these. Well, hopefully we'll approve 8.2 as well, but just let her know, because they did want to look at next steps with trying to roll this out in partnership as well with our other municipal friends and neighbors here in Leeds Grenville. So if you could just send her a note after hopefully we pass this one as well. So anyhow, 8.2 is another resolution from the Task Force on Health and Safety Guidance for businesses, a long one as well. Recommendation, whereas businesses have been drastically impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic and are now struggling with reopening due to interim adjustments to methods of service delivery to meet health and safety guidelines and regulations. And whereas the need for a clear and concise guide for businesses regarding health and safety measures and contacts for enforcement would benefit and be invaluable to local businesses as they implement measures to help safeguard the public and their employees. Therefore, be it resolved that the Council of the Town of Prescott advocates, in consultation with the Leeds, Grenville, and Lanark District Health Unit, for the development of a clear and concise guide for businesses to use when determining who to contact when health and safety measures related to COVID-19 need to be enforced, and that within this guide there be an enforcement responsibility chart for who is responsible to set the COVID-19 health and safety related guidelines and which organization to contact when seeking clarification on those guidelines, and that a copy of this resolution be sent to the Leeds, Grenville, and Lanark District Health Unit and Leeds and Grenville municipalities. Do I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Shankar, seconded by Councillor Jansman. Real brief note of explanation on this one. There's been a lot of confusion with business owners, with the public. This did come up as a significant item at the last task force meeting, that we could seek some clarity on who to talk to, because right now people aren't really sure. Is it health unit? Is it municipality? Is it the OPP? So we're looking just at a little more direct guidance on that in terms of the document that's talked about here. And I think we've had I think we did discuss this at one of the emergency control group meetings. Those ones kind of blend together anymore. A lot of good stuff in them, but a lot of it's COVID all the time. And it does kind of blur after a while, but I think we did discuss that with them as well, and they are aware of the concerns. So we're just trying to raise it a little more formally here with the resolution tonight, and hopefully some support from our Leeds and Grenville partners at the other municipalities who have raised some of the same concerns. So that'll open it up. Comments, questions, please. Seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thanks, everyone. So 9 bylaws tonight. We have the one bylaw, 9.1's video surveillance policy, which we just discussed. First recommendation is that bylaw 26-2020, being a bylaw to establish a video surveillance policy for the corporation of the town of Prescott, be read a first and second time. Could I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Young, seconded by Councillor Ostrander. Any further discussion on that video surveillance policy this evening? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. And recommendation to tie this one off, that bylaw 26-2020, being a bylaw to establish a video surveillance policy for the corporation of the town of Prescott, be read a third time, passed and signed by the mayor and clerk. Any final, could I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Shankar, seconder, Councillor Young. Any discussion on this before I call the vote?
Does this mean we'll have to start calling Matthew Big Brother?
We've already been calling him that, or some of us have. Yeah, well, actually, the one question to ask is I know the cameras have been installed, so they will be active following this meeting with the passage of the policy. Just as a little warning to anyone that might be considering who knows what.
That's correct. We're having the policy in place, as well as the signage will be ordered tomorrow and be put up as soon as it arrives.
Excellent. Thank you very much for this. And with that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Okay, so the one more item tonight is the 10 under new business. That's 10.1. That's the motion of which I gave notice last meeting. So at this point, I'll turn the meeting over to the deputy mayor, because I'm going to speak to this and we'll be making the recommendation. So I believe Deputy Mayor Shankar, I'll hand it over to you, and then if I could speak to the motion and introduce it, please.
Okay, thank you. So we have a staff report 53-2020, speed reduction report for information purposes. Do we want Matt to speak to that? Matthew?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to do that. So following our last council meeting of June 15th, where it was initially brought up and to be brought back for this evening on July 6th. So as you can see, there's several recommendations that were made from the pedestrian death report, which was a report released in 2012 and was an evaluation of all Ontario pedestrian deaths from January 1st, 2010 through December 31st, 2010. So in that, following, several municipalities took a look at what could be done. And in particular, Greater Grand Sudbury took a look at this in 2013, 2014, in terms of a feasibility study and determining how they could implement that 40 kilometers an hour, either in parts of their municipality or across the entire municipality. So certainly we took a look at that report, and in that report, under the old guidelines, you would have to put a change in speed of 40 kilometers an hour on every single street and along every single street so many meters. So it would certainly be a large endeavor to undertake that, and expensive, and that's one of the reasons they decided not to proceed with that. Then in 2017, for implementation in 2018, there was a amendment to the Highway Traffic Act, to the regulations, that now allow areas, either neighborhoods or in a municipality, to change their speed to 40 kilometers an hour and only post at the gateways. So we did confirm with the ministry that if we decided to do the entire town of Prescott, that it would be at the western and eastern borders on King Street, as well as our northern border on Edward Street, that would require that signage. And so they did confirm that for us, and so certainly helpful from that perspective. And then there are other ways to either in conjunction or to implement, and that is taking a look at kind of on-street bollards. Very similar to the stick that you see on our fire hydrants. They can actually be installed along the highway, in the middle of the highway, to remind people to slow down. I was noticing when I traveled out there a couple of weeks ago on our eastern end of King Street, between the fort and the town boundary with New Wexford, it does allow for passing. So it doesn't make much sense to be allowing passing along that stretch if it's only 50 kilometers an hour. So I'd absolutely recommend that be double lined to dissuade that particular activity. Some other things, Toronto, with the change in regulations, you can now, a municipality can now install speed enforcement cameras that automatically read the plates and will start sending out letters automatically to those that break the speed. That they've been running a pilot, I believe, for 6 months and sending out letters to those that are in violation. And I believe starting today, those are going to move from letters to actual enforcement. So there's a number of things out there, a number of tools that we have that in conjunction with changing the speed or instead of changing the speed could also be implemented to help support kind of that slower speed in the town of Prescott. So it's a very lengthy report. Certainly there's the pedestrian death report in there, as well as what Greater Sudbury had also gone through in terms of their analysis and the various pieces of information they pulled. So we're happy to answer any questions, but certainly that's just a little bit of background that we thought would be helpful.
Great. Thank you, Matthew. Are there any questions for Matthew? I can't see everybody, so I can see Ray.
Thank you. Do we have any data from our own speed signs? They all, we've got what, 3 of them or 2 of them in town, and they collect data and we can download that. Does that data prove that we have a speeding issue in town?
So we haven't pulled the data from the one that's on the east end of King Street. I can speak to the last time we pulled the data on the west end that I think the average speed is 52 kilometers an hour. And that's even in an area that is in transition between 60 and 50. The one on the north end of Edward in front of the school, I believe it's recording right around that 50 kilometers as well, even though it's a 40-kilometer zone. So certainly it's not suggesting that we're anywhere in towards the 60, but it's interesting to see that regardless of the speed, the speeds tend to be pretty much exactly the same.
I recall that we did have a request many years ago from Mackenzie, a resident on Mackenzie Road. And there was concern there that a lot of speeding, but when the spy cam went up, I don't think it reflected the same in the stats from that area.
That's correct. So with that particular one, I believe it was about a year and a half ago that we looked at that. And I believe the average speed was under 50 in that case. And there was only one one individual that was over 50 on Mackenzie when it was measured.
Right. At that time, we looked at the possibility of a speed bump as opposed to reducing the legal speed limit. Then we found out that there was a lot more to putting in a speed bump than any of us realized, so we didn't move forward with that. So I'm just, I wish we had more facts about our own town. That coroner's report was very scary. Reading some of that stuff, but well, from time to time, I do get requests about specific streets. I'm just not sure how reducing the speed in the entire town is necessary, especially the Edward Street, King Street. Anyway, I'm open to considering it, but I just like more information.
Thank you, Ray. Mayor Todd?
Just can I introduce the motion and ask for a seconder?
I will second that.
Okay.
The motion just reads that council directs staff to implement a speed limit of 40 kilometers per hour for all motor vehicles within the town of Prescott, and that all plans and preparations with regard to signage, notice to residents, and all other necessary matters to enact this change be completed so that the new speed limit can come into effect on or before September 7th, 2020, in time for the start of the school year. And I would like to speak to that, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Just pull it up here. Just wanted to go over some of the rationale I had for bringing this forward. A couple of items that I'll address. First off is safety. I have noticed an excess speed accompanied by aggressive driving in Prescott. I think it's notable all over town, particularly on King Street East and West and the approaches into town, and at Edward Street, largely between Churchill and the 401 interchanges, but also farther south on Edward. I will note that with the OPP did run traffic at the east end of town, and I believe they found speeds on, I think the average in the 50 was around 70 coming into town there. I'd have to look at that again, but they did run that a second time not long ago and came back to PSP that the speeds were higher than, I see Councilor Ostrander nodding, and I think I'm remembering that correctly. But at any rate, I do think we have some data on that, but anecdotally, I've seen it. I know a lot of people in town have seen it. I've received many complaints about these speeds from residents. I've witnessed it personally. I've seen some passing on King Street during the day around the medical center at quite high rates of speed with significant numbers of people at the beach and at Catarinas at the time, even in recent weeks. I'd say some of this has been with us for some time now, but I think some of it has also been exacerbated by the lower traffic volumes with people staying home due to COVID-19. This is an issue that's been noted in other areas as well. Ottawa has a huge traffic blitz on right now, and I think they've clocked as of, I think this was the last story I saw on this was June 10th, and they'd already issued 1,500 tickets. So they've seen this as and this is not highway speeds, this is within the municipality. Psychologically, I'd say attitudes have changed over the past decade or more when it comes to driving in towns and cities. On surface streets, I think you used to see people would obey the speed limits more. Now it's almost like a 401 mentality of creeping in, where drivers are exceeding the speed limit by 10-20%, resulting in some drivers doing 60 kilometers per hour on some town streets. I think moving to the 40-kilometer standard, while I believe it is not a magic solution by any means, it's one that needs to be accompanied by other measures such as stricter enforcement, which the OPP have already started to undertake, and the possible addition of other traffic calming measures, speed bumps, barriers, maybe speed cameras, and potentially even road design tweaks further down the road. I think moving to the 40 km/h standard as the first salvo sends a powerful message to the community that we're serious about public safety and that aggressive driving at excessive speeds will not be tolerated in Prescott. I want to just mention a couple key facts in the pedestrian death review. That study, which was included in all the agenda packages, reviewed accidental pedestrian deaths in the province. It goes back to 2010 now, but I don't think there'd be a whole lot of difference in that. I think it's still quite timely. And it did note only 5% of all fatal pedestrian accidents were in areas with speed limits below 50 kilometers per hour. That's on page 11 and noted again on page 28 in the study. The fatality risk, and here's a quote from the study, the fatality risk at 50 kilometers per hour being more than twice as high as the risk at 40 kilometers per hour and more than 5 times higher than the risk at 30 kilometers per hour. I'm suggesting 40 here, but I will note that a number of neighborhoods in Ottawa have gone right down to the 30. The other point I wanted to make tonight is regards to the complete streets approach. This was noted in the pedestrian death review as well, and it recommends that all municipalities incorporate this complete street strategy. And this involves kind of a holistic approach that aims to make municipal streets safe for all with an aim to ensuring walkers and cyclists can do so in a safe environment. We all know that a tremendous number of people do walk in our community. We do have a fairly active community, even with our seniors. And this is where it kind of comes into focus for me as well, as the seniors are noted in the pedestrian death review as being particularly vulnerable to fatal accidents with vehicles. Those over 65 accounted for 36% of the deaths studied in the review, while being only 13.2% of the population. That's on page 15 of the report. And of course, we have all received messages from residents in the past about adding such things as cycling lanes and other measures to make Prescott more and more amenable to cyclists and also pedestrians. And I will note that the main recommendations in the pedestrian death review start with speed reduction strategies. That's where it all begins. They most notably recommend the reduction of speed limits on neighborhood streets to 30 kilometers per hour and 40 kilometers on other streets. I think 40 as a whole community is a good idea. So that's why I recommended that. I don't think 30 is necessary at all. And I say, as I mentioned, Ottawa's adopted the 30K standard. Cost, Matthew's already mentioned that. I did get confirmation from MTO. They would regard Prescott as one neighborhood. So the cost would be minimal. You're just looking at, I think, 6 signs, basically double-sided, King Street East, King Street West, Edward Street North. That was great to get MTO support about that. And again, you are seeing more and more municipalities looking at this now that the costs have come down dramatically in the last year and a half. And the timeline on this, I know there's always a possibility we could throw this out for studies and more data and so forth. But to me, the anecdotal things that I've seen in town, and I drive around town a lot, that I've seen around town, and also the data in that pedestrian death study, I think there's a need to move on it now so we're ready for the fall. The study also noted that most fatal collisions with pedestrians take place in the fall and the winter months. January is the peak. So I think there's some real need to move forward on this now, to make the statement that we're a safe community and we're good. We're a place you can walk, you can cycle, and you can just get out and enjoy your town streets and roads without having to worry about excessive speeds and so forth. So I think this is a good start for that complete streets approach, going to the 40. Again, the cost is minimal. The potential benefits are definitely there, and the stats definitely suggest that it's a good idea, and one that I think that will be adopted more and more in Ontario as we move forward. So that's the rationale for my motion this evening. And I'll just get back to, again, I've received many complaints from residents, and I finally had just sort of one too many not long ago, and I realized I really needed to take this to council so we can make the final decision on it. Thanks very much, Mr. Chair, and sorry for taking so much time.
No problem. Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this matter? Teresa, then Mike.
Thank you. Just wanted to express why I'm in so much support of this and why it was great to be able to second this motion. Back in February, I went to the Good Roads Conference, as you may recall, And I sat on a seminar there, and that prompted me to come back to town and email our senior staff as well as our mayor to get the opinion of changing. At that time, I wasn't thinking big enough. I was just proposing, asking for their opinion of reducing the speed limit in our downtown. Although I'm in favor of what we did down there with the downtown traffic lights, it has now caused people to perhaps believe that they can just drive right through. And I've noticed a considerable change in that. But all around town, speed seems to be an issue. So I have taken the last couple of weeks knowing that this was coming up to ask the residents of their opinion on this. And I have received overwhelming support to the point where I received an email today ensuring that I was going to support this. So I do agree it's not the only thing. We're going to have to enforce it. We're going to have to do other things, but this is definitely the first necessary step. Even on my little street, it's just shocking to me how people drive so fast, and it can't hurt. And it will send a message that we care about the residents and we care about the safety.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I early on supported this motion or the reduction to 40 kilometers an hour. And I also backed up the mayor at a recent police services board meeting where we made a pitch about a couple of weekends in a row in June here, got a little out of control as far as speeding and reckless driving, passing in dangerous situations. And I think lowering it to 40 gives the police a lot more leverage in dealing with things that are speed related. The pedestrian issue is there. The kids on bikes are there. The scooters and various things. So I think it's our best interest moving forward that 40 kilometers an hour be the norm. The old adage was when you were doing 50, when you're doing 60 and a 50, you'd get a warning. If you're doing 70 and a 50, you'd get a ticket. So even if that mentality drops down 10K each one, you'll get a warning at 50 and a ticket at 60 and a 40. I don't know if that's going to become the standard rallying cry of the younger drivers or not, but hopefully it becomes a little better leverage tool for the OPP. And I'm hoping that they take advantage of it when it's new. The best time to get people doing something that is brand new to them is in the first stages. Back, and of course, it's a little bit of a history lesson, back in the late 70s when seatbelts became mandatory, we in police forces saturated checkpoints and towns and various places and highways as well, but places where we could safely stop vehicles, make checkpoints, stop 8-10 vehicles in a row and just check for seatbelts. And that was the message back then. Some will remember that stuck in your mind as you move forward through the generations, and you were educating your own kids and now grandkids into these things. So hopefully this is a cue to drivers in Prescott, and hopefully it's a cue to the OPP too, that we definitely want to see overall speeds reduced. I know the mayor had a couple of incidents himself that really prompted the kickstart on this, and good on him that we are at this point, and I think it's only right that we approve this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Anyone else there? Oh, Lee, go ahead. Councilor McConnell.
Thanks, Gory. This is a bit difficult for me. I actually took my car out before the meeting for half an hour and toured around town, different streets. and I tried driving at 40 kilometers an hour, and really on the east-west streets that we have, 40 kilometers an hour is lots fast enough, and you could drop it down below that and not have a problem. There were places in town though, King Street East, King Street West, Boundary Street, going up the overpass, where at 40 miles an hour or 40 kilometers an hour, quite frankly, I felt that I was crawling and traffic was backing up behind me. So while I think that 40 Ks is probably good enough for the most of town, I really struggle with doing our main streets at that. Two things that I did notice, and Matthew pointed out one of them. What I did was I drove down to Wexford and then drove into town, and instead of dropping it to 50, I dropped it to 40, and I was crawling along there. I found that very slow in the East End in front of the golf course. But I did notice that it's a passing zone, and I've noticed that before, and that should have never been a passing zone. We should get rid of that right off the bat. That will reduce speeds there regardless of what we do. The other thing that I noticed was in the west end of King Street, and that's where I've got the most complaints when I'm out walking, because I walk through the park in the west end. So I drove up to Riverview Heights, turned around and drove back in. And I think what we need to do is get some cooperation from our neighbors in Augusta, because the speed limit is actually 60 until you hit the town limits. And the town limits is not the westernmost house on the riverside. It's actually in front of Weiser Hall. So at the west end of Weiser Hall, it's a 60 k an hour speed limit. And then you hit Weiser Hall building, and it's 50. And if we don't get a cooperation from Augusta to drop their speed limit up there, it's going to go to 60 to 40 in the space of a few feet in what people would consider within the town limits. And even when I was doing 40 coming into town, well, actually I did it twice. I did it at 50, and no, I'm sorry, I did it at 60 because the speed limit was 60. And by the time I actually slowed down to 40, just taking my foot off the gas, I was way down the street at St. Lawrence Street. So it's tough to get people to brake coming into a town on a main highway. To me, I think what we need to do, irregardless of what we do with this bylaw, is to ask Augusta Township to drop the speed coming into Prescott from the west. We have a sign that says 50 kilometers an hour. And if we do go to 40, that's a redundant sign. If we back that sign out to where it says 50 ahead, and then back that sign out to where they have 60 around the curve, we're going to slow people coming into town down to 50 before they hit the 40. So I think that's elementary. We have to work with Augusta to get them to drop the speed limit coming into town. I do support the 40 kilometers an hour limit around town, but I am very concerned about those areas where it is really slow. And I think if you pass a law that people aren't going to obey, and I think that's what's going to happen in the east end of town and the west end of town and some of our main streets, you could ticket all you want. It's just people aren't going to do it. But if what happens, as Mike suggested, at 50 you're going to get a warning. If the speed limit is 40, I can live with that, because I think a lot of people will still drive 50 on those main streets as long as they just get a warning and don't get a ticket. And if they're over 50, well then fine, give them a ticket. Thank you.
I definitely agree. I mean, we're gonna need buy-in from the OPP, and we're gonna need them to not just do it once or twice, but unfortunately we'll probably all end up getting tickets at some point, and hopefully we're not stupid enough to argue it, but away we go. I know, Leanne, I can't see you, but Leanne, I heard you have your hand up, so go ahead, dear.
Thank you. 40 kilometers is definitely going to be a change again. We've already did a lot of changes downtown with our lights, and that caused a lot of concern with citizens. Making another change at this time, I feel it's not really feasible. There is some areas in town that are 40 school zones. I think that's really important for those areas there. But making another change at this time, I'm not, I don't think I'm going to be supporting this right now. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Leanne. Mayor Todd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a comment, Councilor McConnell's. Yeah, excellent points. And we actually, Matthew and I had a meeting with Mayor Malenka and their CAO. Was it well, no, 2 weeks ago, Matthew, and we did raise that. The one other issue that is happening here that, you know, is right in our border as well is Augusta just dropped the speed limit to 50 all the way through Maitland. And they're looking at how Mayor Malenka expressed it to me is he thinks basically 60 should be essentially the speed limit along that whole stretch of 2 between Brockville and Prescott. And obviously we've seen the speed limits adjusted there. The 50 is the most extreme aspect of that. And we did ask about moving the speed sign out further into Augusta so there's more warning coming in, so it wouldn't be just like 60 bang 40. We would be looking at them to possibly move to 50 in the Riverview Heights area as well, as they did with Maitland. That again is it's still up in the air with that, but I know there's been some significant concern with the municipality, the Township of Augusta, on the speeds on Highway 2 for the exact same reasons we're looking at this here. So again, I would strongly reiterate this is a vital move that we need to make right now to help secure our streets. And I think, you know, Constable Ostrander, I'll refer to him at this point, Mike knows how the enforcement is done and what's allowable. And, you know, doing 60 and a 40 is a much bigger stretch than doing 60 and a 50. So if we can get it down to 40, and, you know, almost everybody cheats a little bit when it comes to speed, I'd rather see them cheating between 40 and 50 than between 50 and 60 and even 70, as we've seen in some areas of town. And again, I will say I've talked to a lot of people in town about this over a great length of time, and I haven't had a single person say that they're against it.
Okay, thank you. Are we ready to have a vote on this?
I'd ask for a recorded vote, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Last question there, Lee.
A comment, Glory, not a question. Personally, I would rather see this deferred. I'm not going to support this tonight. If I had written a written agreement from Augusta Township that they were definitely going to drop the speed limit coming into town from the west, I would support it. But I would like to see that before I would vote in favor of it, because I think going from 60 to 40 in the stretch of a few feet is not reasonable coming into town. It's a downhill slope. So I'm going to vote, I will have to vote against it. But like I said, if you wanted to defer it, get a agreement from Augusta that they will drop the speed limit, then I would support it at a future date.
Okay, thank you, Councilor McConnell. I think at this point we've talked a little bit about how Augusta is on board with this. We want to get this rolled out before school starts. So I think I'd call the question anyway. You know, I don't think we're ever going to get unanimous on a lot of our motions, but I think we call the question, and if Kimberly, if you could record the answers, we'll do that. Should I read the recommendation again?
Sure, and through you, our deputy clerk is going to be calling the vote this evening. Thank you.
Okay. So the recommendation that the council directs staff to implement a speed limit of 40 kilometers an hour for all motor vehicles within the town of Prescott, and that all plans and preparations with regard to signage, notice to residents, and all other necessary matters to enact this change be completed so that the new speed limit can come into effect on or before September 7th, 2020, in time for the start of the school year. All those in favor?
Oh, sorry, Mayor Todd called for recorded vote.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, sorry.
Are you okay if I do that now?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Councillor Burton?
No.
Councillor Jansman?
Yes.
Councillor McConnell?
Without Augusta, I have to vote no.
Councillor Ostrander?
Yes.
Councillor Shankar?
Yes.
Mayor Todd? Councillor Young?
I was going to vote no. And does Mayor Todd's vote count since he was muted?
Yes.
Was that intentional?
We read your lips, Brett, but.
So the motion passes 4 yeas.
And if I could add, Councillor McConnell, we will make the Augusta agreement part of the plans and preparations. I think we can reach out to them immediately on that because they did express some willingness to talk about that, moving signs and so forth. There is a county's role there as well. The counties didn't stand in their way when they wanted to make the change at Maitland. So I know I don't want to put words into Mayor Malenka's mouth, but I think we can work with them on this.
Well, seeing as how our signs are going to be redundant, we can even donate them to them because it's going to be the same sign. They're just going to back it up.
So I turn it back over to you, Mayor Todd.
Yes, please. And thank you very much. And thanks everyone on that. And thanks for the support. Thanks also for the good debate. And it's not something that I really wanted to bring forward in many ways. I just felt I had to with the amount of pressure I was getting from residents. And I think we can make this new policy work for the town very effectively. So with that, we do have, we've moved through new business. So we're on to the closed session under item 11. So we'll make the motion now to move into the closed session or 11.1 purchase and sale. The recommendation reads that we move into closed session at 8:49 p.m. to address matters pertaining to 11.1 purchase and sale under section 238(2)(c) of the Municipal Act 2001, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality, and that the CAO, treasurer, economic development officer, clerk, and deputy clerk remain in the room. Do I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Burton, seconded by Councillor Ostrander. All in favor? So we'll take a break till 9 o'clock and then come back with the closed session.